Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. On today's show, Israel's defence forces signal a ground invasion of the southern Gazan city of Rafah is imminent.
Plus, the path is cleared for John Swinney to become Scotland's next First Minister.
And in the Premier League, have Tottenham blown their chances of playing in the Champions League next season after losing to Liverpool?
All that to come. It's Monday, the 6th of May. Israeli Defence Forces tells Palestinians to evacuate parts of Rafah in Gaza, suggesting that a long-threatened offensive is imminent. Documents seen exclusively by Sky News reveal the government considered using Iraq to process asylum seekers like the Rwanda scheme. 12 months on, King Charles to mark an, at times, difficult first year on the throne. The sound there of protest in land long considered sacred, which is now at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
And in sport, Lando Norris gets the first win of his Formula One career with victory in Miami, albeit with the help of the safety car.
Madonna, Christ the Redeemer and 1.6 million fans turn Rio's Copacabana beach into one of the biggest dance floors ever seen. Good morning. We begin with some breaking news. Israel's defence forces have told Palestinians to evacuate the southern Gazan city of Rafah. Civilians have been told to move to Moassil, which Israel's declared a humanitarian area, which is down by the coast. Well, Sky's international correspondent John Sparks joins us live now from Jerusalem. John, what more are we hearing?
Well, I think the key thing here is that senior Israeli officials have been threatening a major new military offensive in southern Gaza for the past few weeks. Overnight, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said it could take place imminently, and it does seem now that they are taking a major step towards that. A statement this morning from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, is encouraging, in their words, encouraging residents in southeast Gaza to advance towards what they call an expanded humanitarian area to the north. That is centered around the city of Khan Yunis and a coastal community called Al-Mawasi. They claim that this area contains field hospitals, tents, food, water, medicine, additional supplies. That is a claim that international aid agencies, the WFP and the like, will treat with real skepticism. I think they say the Israelis have not done enough to facilitate these humanitarian supplies. Should also say that people are being asked to go to an area that has already been badly damaged, badly bombed in this war. The area around the city of Khan Yunis was largely destroyed in January when the IDF laid siege to it. So we're talking about a situation where people are being asked to migrate again, and I think we should probably talk about the significance of this. 1.2 million civilians crowded into the southern section of Gaza. They're now being asked, really at the point of another mass migration back to the north to an area that has been badly bombed. And I think this is going to create an absolute storm of protest internationally. The Americans last week said that the Israelis didn't have a credible plan to support civilians if they went ahead with this southern Gazan incursion, an incursion into Rafah. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, we can't support such an incursion if the Israelis go ahead with this without a plan. So I think the Israelis are really pushing at the very boundaries of Western support, of international support with this.
John, for the moment, thank you so much. Just a reminder, there's plenty more insight and analysis on the situation in Gaza and Israel on the Sky News app and on the Sky News website as well. Meanwhile, the government at one point considered sending asylum seekers to Iraq for processing, similar to the Rwanda scheme. That's according to documents seen by Sky News. Mari's here for more on this. What are these documents telling us?
So this is a really fascinating revelation by our colleague Serena Barker-Singh for Sky News. Now, this is all about the fact that Sky News has exclusively seen documents between high-ranking officials essentially saying that Iraq was being considered as one of the countries to potentially send asylum seekers, migrants to that country for processing. Now, it's important to remember to start with that the government, if you go on the FCDO website, they advise against all travel to Iraq apart from one region. And even that region, they say, only essential travel. So essentially, they don't encourage travel to Iraq really at all. And now it's come to light that they were actually considering sending migrants there for processing in this kind of third country scheme similar to the Rwanda scheme. Now, we already have an existing returns agreement with Iraq. Those are obviously only for people who are from Iraq that would be returned to Iraq. And interestingly, in some of these documents that have been seen by Sky News, it talks about how there was a request for discretion when it comes to the UK and Iraqi returns agreement. They didn't want any formal agreement. They didn't want any kind of public agreement or any publicity around it. Interestingly, documents that show about the negotiations' progress seem to show that actually they were quite advanced. So a quote here from a table in these documents says, good recent progress with Iraq, for instance. And interestingly, what also is being revealed in these documents is guidance from high-ranking officials say that actually people should, the government should be prepared to pay over the odds. It's a direct quote, prepared to pay over the odds to get the Rwanda policy over the line, and that actually the initial offer from the Rwandan government was considered quite a modest sum. Now, let's not forget, we're paying about over 350 million for the Rwanda policy. It works out at about 1.8 million per person for the first 300. So it was an extremely expensive policy. And now it appears that officials were saying, actually, you're going to have to be prepared to pay really through the nose for a policy like this. Really fascinating revelations. We've put this to the government, haven't heard back yet from the Home Office, but as soon as we get that, we'll bring it to you.
We certainly will, Mari, for the moment. Thank you so much. Worth noting as well that you should stay with us because shortly we'll be joined by the Conservative MP, Maria Caulfield. That's coming up in a few moments' time. And at 8:15, speaking to the Labour Party chair, Annalise Dodds. In some of the day's other stories now, relatives of 3 tourists who were reported missing in Mexico last weekend have identified their bodies. The remains of 2 Australian brothers and an American were found in a well not far from where they were last seen in Baja California. Investigators say the men had been shot. 3 people have been charged. Rains have eased around the US city of Houston, which is experiencing severe flooding, but more is expected later in the week. High flood waters have left hundreds of people in need of being rescued or evacuated. A 5-year-old boy was killed in the nearby city of Fort Worth. Rail and tram passengers face a week of disruption. Members of the Train Drivers Union, ASLEF, will begin a 6-day overtime ban today. They will also stage 3 one-day strikes across different operators this week as part of a long-running dispute over pay. China's President Xi Jinping has arrived in France, his first stop on a 3-country trip through Europe. Later today, Xi Jinping will meet the French leader Emmanuel Macron and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The French president is expected to ask Beijing to step up pressure on Moscow to halt the war in Ukraine. Well, let's bring in our Beijing correspondent, Nicole Johnston. Nicole, lots of talk about what the Europeans will say to Xi Jinping. To what degree do you think the Chinese leader will listen, and to what degree do you think he'll act on that?
Well, certainly from China's perspective, they will be trying to stabilise their relationship with Europe. This is his first trip to Europe in 5 years, a long time, since before COVID. And it comes at a really difficult and sensitive time in that relationship. As you said, the big issue has really been Russia and Ukraine. Both Europe and the United States say that China is sending machinery tools, semiconductors, these sorts of items to Russia, which allow it to continue to wage its war in Ukraine. Now, the US said that if China doesn't do something about it, doesn't address the problem, then the US will do so. And we're likely to get a similar message from Europe to China during this trip. It's certainly frustrated with China on this issue. The other really big issue that we've been hearing a lot about over the last few weeks is trade. And that's because China is producing a phenomenal amount of electric vehicles right now. The scale of it is really off the charts, and it has got Europe worried, especially those big manufacturing bases in Germany and France. They're worried that they can't compete, and that's because the scale and the prices here are so cheap compared with what they can do in Europe. So over the last few weeks, we have had the US Secretary of State here in Beijing. We've had the German Chancellor, all pushing this same message, which we are now likely to get in Europe, which is accusing China of overcapacity, producing too many of them. Now, China says that there is more than enough demand in the world for all of the electric vehicles and that the world needs them and they need China to produce as much as possible. So some really difficult issues that are unlikely to be resolved. At the same time, the European Commission is in the middle of an investigation considering imposing tariffs on these electric vehicles, and all of this is certainly going to be difficult sticking points with the Chinese. After France, though, President Xi Jinping will have a slightly easier trip. He'll be visiting Serbia and Hungary. They both have close relationships with China and with Russia, but France will be a difficult trip for the president.
Nicole, joining us from Beijing for the moment. Thank you. Let's turn our attention to Scotland now, shall we? Because John Swinney appears set to become Scotland's next First Minister after his sole challenger for SNP leader Graham McCormick pulled out of contention. Well, let's cross live now to our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis, who's with us. And Conor, this has gone from a contest to a coronation.
Well, that's right. Look back at Thursday of last week, that moment where John Swinney, the former Deputy First Minister of Scotland, the man with lots of ministerial experience, took to the stage and called for unity, called for the party to come back together after a period of years which has been really, really difficult. Stepping aside and paving the way for him to make that move, to head towards a coronation at the top of the SNP, was his one-time potential rival, Kate Forbes. He's offered her a significant role within his cabinet. But then over the course of the weekend, there were rumours swirling around here in Scotland that some within the grassroots movement of the SNP weren't quite happy at John Swinney going uncontested, and there wouldn't be a kind of internal debate within the party to head towards its new leader. So step forward a man called Graham McCormack. He's essentially been a bit of a thorn in the side of the SNP hierarchy for quite some time. He spoke at the SNP's conference in October last year in Aberdeen, and suggested at that moment that things weren't great within the party, and he made his feelings clear. He came out over the weekend, apparently was garnering some support at an independence rally in Glasgow on a clipboard with some signatures, and he said that he had 100 signatures from 20 different branches, and that would be him entering the race, John Swinney and Graham McGoldrick. Now that, I think it's fair to say, would have been pretty embarrassing for the SNP to have to endure 3 weeks of this. The party would say, look, that is democracy. But then late last night, Graham McCormack dropped myself and other colleagues within the media an email to say, look, he'd had talks with John Swinney yesterday. He was pulling out of the race despite him having the required nominations to go into the contest if he so wished to do so. So there we have, essentially paving the way for a John Swinney coronation today. We're expecting the result to be confirmed around midday, barring any more bombshells. John Swinney will be the SNP leader later today. He will take over from Humza Yousaf, who will be leaving through the same door that he sacked the Greens from a couple of weeks ago.
Conor, thank you so much. Now then, 4 men have been arrested after £40 million worth of cocaine was found in East Yorkshire. Meanwhile, another bust, that time further away in the Caribbean for the Royal Navy. Asha's here for more on this. These are huge figures that are being reported this morning.
Yeah, extraordinary. If we start with the first one that happened in Lely in East Yorkshire, a fascinating tale because, as you say, £40 million worth of cocaine found in the back of a van that was parked in a pub car park, can you believe, of the Stag's Head Inn. This is all of it laid out for people to see. Inside that van, officers found 500 kilograms worth of cocaine. Now, officers believe that because the pub is so near a beach, they believe that the drugs were transferred to shore via a rib that had come off the back of a larger vessel that had been moored off the Hull coast. 4 men, as you say, have been arrested, 3 men from the west coast of Scotland and 1 man from Colombia. They believe, Humberside Police, this is a sizable blow to the work of this organised crime group. It comes at the same time. We've got news from the Royal Navy. A crew there on board HMS Trent, which is currently working within the Caribbean Sea, has seized £204 million. This is the crew.
They really upped the ante, didn't they, with that drug bust?
They really have. All of it laid out in front of them, I believe. Now, it's a fascinating tale again, because HMS Trent had been parked off the coast, as I say, of the Caribbean near Martinique. They had been analysing radars and had kind of pinpointed a vessel working with the United States. It looked quite dodgy. They started following it, and that vessel was trying to evade capture, and they started to see men on board throwing overboard these barrels of cocaine. So as part of their operation, once they tracked them down, involved actually them combing through the seabed, trying to pick up these barrels of cocaine to try and build their case. But as part of that, they say they've been hunting drug smugglers since December last year. And in addition to what they have seized now, this £204 million, overall they've seized and stopped £500 million worth of cocaine making its way potentially to the UK shores.
Absolutely remarkable figures. Ashley, for the moment, thank you. Let's turn our attention to the United States now, because Native Americans are protesting against land that they consider sacred from being turned into America's largest lithium mine. The mine, though, would be crucial to the Biden administration's green energy plans, and our US correspondent James Matthews has all the details from Nevada.
This is northern Nevada, in the wild and west. These are Native Americans, and this was their environmental protest. Tell me, what is this about? What's today about?
Today is the last day of the prayer horse ride across northern Nevada through our indigenous communities.
They were heading to Sentinel Mountain, which their ancestors once used as a lookout. This area, they say, witnessed indigenous massacres. One in 1865, when more than 30 tribal members were killed by US cavalry. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution, where construction has started on a lithium mine, so-called white gold, to make batteries for electric vehicles.
You know, we're people too.
Myron Smart says his grandmother escaped the massacre here in 1865 when she was a baby. Industrializing this place, he says, offends her memory and reflects the story of Native Americans through time.
To me, it's a sacred ground, but to the government, it's, you know, it's just, it's just Native American, that's all it is.
The company Lithium Americas is mining the Thacker Pass site on what is public land. It highlights a community benefits agreement signed with a local tribe. It says concerns about cultural and environmental resources were thoroughly addressed in the environmental impact assessment of a government body, and that it withstood comprehensive reviews by federal district and circuit courts. It hasn't silenced objections from opponents, who maintain the key evidence lies in eyewitness testimony passed down orally through generations.
Back in our ancestors' days, they didn't write any documentations down, they didn't send letters, they didn't write in journals, so there was no way that, I guess, you know, the United States government could know our story.
What's happening here feeds into Joe Biden's energy policy. The US president wants to make this country a world leader in electric vehicles. Sourcing its own lithium is central to it. The argument here is that in pursuit of a greener future, the past is paying too high a price. James Matthews, Sky News, in Thacker Pass, Nevada.
It's 7:18, it's Bank Holiday Monday. Time now to talk to the government. The Health Minister and Conservative MP for Lewis, Maria Caulfield, joins us this morning. You picked the short straw then on a Bank Holiday Monday, but we appreciate you making time for us. You've had the long weekend to consider the results of the local elections. I'm interested for your reaction.
Yeah, well, clearly what the results show is that while they're very disappointing to be losing some really hard-working councillors. Actually, when you look at what the opinion polls were saying, that Labour had a 20-point lead. Actually, when the analysis has been done, it's much tighter than that, between 7 to 9 points. And experts are saying if this was reflected in a general election, that actually Labour wouldn't be winning a majority. It would be more like a hung parliament, and then depending on parties like the Lib Dems and the SNP to form a government. And so actually our message from that is we need to continue to deliver on the priorities people have asked us to deliver on. And come a general election, they will have a much tougher choice to make, whether they want Keir Starmer as their Prime Minister or Rishi Sunak, who is delivering on things. The economy is improving, NHS waiting lists are down for the 5th month in a row, and we are turning the tide on the illegal immigration and small boats.
That's your focus on Labour there, but you can't deny that the Conservatives lost 474 seats in the local elections, lost control of 12 councils, lost mayors as well. It wasn't a good local election season for you, and that's undeniable.
Absolutely. Very disappointing, particularly with Andy Street. But when these seats were fought the last time, there was a particularly high bar for the Conservative Party. It's always difficult when you've been in government, and voters can send a message to a party in government that they're unhappy about certain things, with the safe knowledge that they still have a Conservative government in control. It's very different at come a general election, where they really do have to make a choice. If you look at Blackpool South, for example, the vast majority of our voters that voted for us in 2019 stayed at home. They didn't switch to Labour, they didn't switch to Reform, they stayed at home. And that shows that they haven't really been tempted by other parties, but they need us to deliver on the economy, on the NHS, on immigration, on the 5 points that the Prime Minister set out, which were what we set out to achieve in 2019. And we're starting to make some inroads on that. So by the time the election comes, people should feel that difference and not just know that it's happening in theory.
With respect, though, that feels, is it not, too little too late, that in an election year you can't get your own voters to come out and support your party? Is that not indicative of the fact that the plan that you say you're trying to follow isn't doing enough, isn't delivering enough?
Well, if you look since the election in 2019, within 8 weeks of the general election, COVID hit, and the country was in lockdown for almost 2 years. So that meant that 2 years of our kind of time to get a lot of this done was taken away, because we had to deal with the pandemic, we had to save people's jobs, we had to get the NHS back on track. Within the 18 months that Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister, our waiting lists are coming down compared to where Labour run the health service in Wales. People are still waiting 2 years for procedures and operations there. It's between 6 to 9 months in England. If you look at the economy, we've just delivered another cut in national insurance for working people. That's about £900 a year. People start to feel that in their pocket. That's only possible because Rishi and the government got inflation down. He always was very clear on that when he stood as Prime Minister. You've got to tackle inflation before you can do the tax cuts. Inflation is down and tax cuts are coming. On immigration, we have fought such a battle with people like the House of Lords, with the Labour Party, to get our Rwanda plan through. But despite that, we've also been, we deported 25,000 people last year. We've been tackling the backlog. We've closed 150 of those hotels. People will start to see that plan working. That doesn't just happen by chance. It doesn't happen in a few weeks. That takes months to get that sort of progress. And people will start to see and feel that difference on those key issues.
You bring us nicely on to reports from Sky News this morning. We've seen documents from the government that there were plans potentially to send asylum seekers to Iraq. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm not aware of those details. Our plan is around Rwanda, and we have detained people that are being kind of earmarked for flights to Rwanda. Once those flights take off, there will be a steady drumbeat of flights going on a regular basis. I'm not aware of those plans that you talk about for other countries. Our focus is really on getting that Rwanda plan working, but also tackling immigration overall. You look at the deals we did with Albania, for example. Albanian illegal migrants are down 90%. So there is work going on with other countries, but the focus at the moment is getting those flights off the ground.
Regardless as to whether or not, and I appreciate your brief does not cover this, regardless as to whether or not you've seen those plans, people will surely be asking whether it was appropriate to discuss it in the first place, considering that the UK government does not recommend that Brits travel to Iraq. You've seen so much debate and division over whether or not Rwanda is a safe country. It surely goes without reason that the concept of sending people to Iraq is nonsensical.
Well, I haven't seen those plans, so I can't really comment. But on your point about is Rwanda a safe country, the Parliament has determined that it is. I've spent probably more than most time in Rwanda. I spent a number of summers there, both working, volunteering in nursing and teaching English. And Rwanda, is a very welcoming. It's an up-and-coming country, and I find some of the discussions around Rwanda, is it safe, pretty worrying, to be honest. And I think officials from Rwanda have found that quite insulting too. So we have got a plan for Rwanda, and we are in the process of getting people detained, and we'll be going to Rwanda shortly. That's the focus that we're doing. If you put, as your original question was saying about why people, how are they thinking about the general election ahead, ask Labour what their plan is. They can't even determine whether they would keep the Rwanda scheme should it be successful. They say they would scrap it but have no plan of their own to tackle immigration. They're performing far worse in Labour-run Wales on the health service than we are in England.
We'll speak to Labour later in the programme. You also want to talk about what you hope will also be a vote winner this morning.
Yes, so absolutely. So we're announcing this morning our plans around making sure that any future public spaces for toilets are single-sex space. This is a particular issue for women. Polling shows that women who use those mixed-sex toilets, about 60% feel very uncomfortable in doing so. So having protected single-sex spaces for women going forward, will bring legislation forward to enable that to happen. It may seem like a small issue, but actually it's really important to women. And when we've done our consultation, about 80% of people support this change. And it's a part of a wider narrative that we have about supporting women. We've just published our NHS constitution, again, protecting same-sex spaces in hospitals, enabling women to be able to ask the people of the same biological sex to care for them, to carry out investigations. We want to make sure that women feel safe in the public space, and there is no doubt that this is something that women have been asking for quite a long time.
Maria Corfield joining us this morning on a bank holiday. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now imagine this, 1.6 million people on a beach in Brazil, all singing and dancing to the same single artist. Her name is Madonna. Not that she really needs introduction, but the Queen of Pop chose to make the final concert in her farewell tour free to her fans. There they are, lining the beaches of Rio. A huge turnout for a single artist, potentially the biggest ever. So that's the scene on the beaches of Rio. What about the scene in sport?
I wish I'd known about that concert.
You're a little peeved, aren't you?
Yeah. I would have loved to have been there. I've been there for New Year's Eve a few times, and it's crazy, but in a really good way.
That would have been fun, particularly fun.
Yeah, particularly fun. It would have been quite fun for a few teams in the Premier League yesterday. There were a lot of goals scored. Another big day there, with European places for next season still up for grabs. All smiles again at Anfield for Jurgen Klopp's penultimate home match as Liverpool boss. Loads of goals there. Even more here at this match. It was an emotional Emma Hayes saying goodbye to the Chelsea fans in her final home game at Kingsmeadow. It was quite a display from her team. And the title race in the WSL took an unexpected turn as Manchester City lost to Arsenal, meaning that Chelsea still have a chance.
Good morning, you're watching Breakfast on Sky News. Coming up, as the King marks 1 year since his coronation, we're joined by the Sun's former royal correspondent, Charles Ray.
Plus, in the sport, loads of goals for Chelsea, whichever team you support, the women, the men, whatever, loads of goals. And it was a great day also for Lando Norris.
It certainly was. We'll have all of that coming up. But first, let's remind you of our top stories this morning. Israel's defence forces have told Palestinians to evacuate the southern Gazan city of Rafah. Civilians have been told to move to Moasser, which Israel's declared a humanitarian area near the coast. The government at one point considered sending asylum seekers to Iraq for processing, similar to the Rwanda scheme. That's according to documents seen by Sky News. The plan, if enacted, could have seen people sent from the UK to a country that the Foreign Office advises against all travel to. The United Nations has added its voice to criticism of Israel's decision to shut the local offices of the satellite news channel Al Jazeera and block it from broadcasting inside the country. It's an initial 45-day ban that can be renewed. The King is celebrating 1 year since the coronation, with gun salutes expected across the UK today. The King returned to public duties last week after stepping back to receive treatment for cancer. Well, let's get more on that. Let's bring in Charles Ray, the Sun's former royal correspondent, who joins us now. Talk to us about the past year for the King. How do you make of the last 12 months?
Well, the King has had a very difficult year, really, given that he's had cancer diagnosis and he's still battling that cancer. Now, we're being told that things are going very, very well for the King, but he's not out of the woods yet. And he's also got two major family problems. One, his own son, Prince Harry, who we believe he may see this week because Harry's coming over for a church service to mark the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games. And of course, his errant brother, Prince Andrew. Those two cause him immense problems and continue to do so. Plus, of course, there's also the fact that his daughter-in-law is also battling cancer. So it's not been easy, but I think he's doing very well in his first year. I think he's become really a true man of the people. He's a man who likes to keep going, and throughout his cancer diagnosis, he has been working away behind the scenes.
You mentioned there a man of the people. We saw for his decades as the Prince of Wales, he was very proactive in causes that were close to him, whether that was architecture through to rare breeds, whether that was anything in between. Do you think it's fair to say that he's been a bit more proactive than his mother was as sovereign? We've seen him sharing, for example, his public health diagnosis. We've seen him donating fridges and freezers to help food banks as well. Is he playing a bit more of a proactive role in that role with regards to communicating and being at one with the public?
I think he is playing a more proactive role than his mother. Of course, you know, the monarchy evolves, and he has evolved with it. I mean, he's always been someone who many people say interfered in a number of things. But you know, he's a man of strong opinions. He can't be as strong as he was with his opinions when he was Prince of Wales. But yes, certainly, you're absolutely right, Gareth. There are certain things that we see now that the monarchy has moved on. Yes, we're hearing a little bit more about the inner machinations of the monarchy with his diagnosis and so forth, and even, you know, Catherine, her diagnosis. So yes, they are, I think, becoming more and more attuned to the country.
You mentioned there the obvious family quirks, challenges, troubles. How does the royal family go about trying to heal those rifts? Or does it just let it slide and hope that in actually allowing those relationships to separate actually brings about a bit more harmony within the working roles that remain?
Well, the king. Sorry, I keep calling him the prince, but the king has always wanted a slimmed down monarchy. And so we've got, through natural selection, if you like, two key members have now moved away. Harry has gone off with Meghan to Montecito, so he's no longer on the scene, and his brother has been removed as a member of the working royal family because of the various problems and legal matters that he's had to deal with. I think those two problems are not going to be easy to solve. I mean, he's supposed to be seeing Harry this week for a short visit. Meghan's not coming over with him, so that's another problem. I never thought she would be here. I don't think she'll set foot in this country ever again. But he's got to sort that out. And let's not forget, Harry has still got this problem with his elder brother William. They don't get on. There is nothing on the horizon that says that they are going to, have a rapprochement at all. So these two problems will carry on for a considerable time. I can't see any solution to it, really.
Charles Ray joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Jackie's here to talk to us all things sport, in particular Formula 1A.
I know. Do you remember I was trying to remember that quote earlier on, which I really shouldn't have started because I couldn't remember it. But anyway, I found it. So it's try again, fail better. But the original quote is ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. Samuel Beckett.
I quite like SWSWSWN. Some will, some won't. So what next?
Oh, that's
quite nice.
OK, how about this one? Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Who said that?
Not a clue.
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. All the inspirational quotes on Monday morning.
Anyway,
they worked for one man, didn't they?
There's lots about failing because Lando Norris really epitomises that try again motto. He's claimed his first victory of his Formula One career in his 110th race as he took full advantage of a timely safety car. He then pulled away from Max Verstappen to win the Miami Grand Prix. Well, it means he's finally shed the unwanted record of the most podium finishes without a win in his 6th season of F1. Norris ran only 6th in the race's opening stages, but the decision by McLaren to extend his opening stint proved inspired when the safety car was called out for a crash. Williams' Logan Sargent was the crash, having already inherited the lead with all of those ahead of him having pitted by then, including Verstappen. Norris was then crucially able to pit while the rest of the field ran to the reduced speed behind the safety car and re-emerged still in front. He was happy.
It's incredible. I don't know what I'm meant to say. I just want to smile the rest of the day. It's an amazing feeling seeing everyone applauding and cheering and seeing the whole team there, so happy. I've let them down a few times, but I think today makes up for every moment that we've had together, the ups and downs.
Well, a surprise guest in the McLaren garage was the former US President Donald Trump, who spoke with McLaren boss Zak Brown before the race. In yesterday's Premier League action, Liverpool beat Tottenham 4-2 to all but end Spurs' hopes of Champions League football next season. Well, after his touchline argument with boss Jurgen Klopp, Mo Salah was back in the manager's good books after opening the scoring for Liverpool on 16 minutes. Andy Robertson then made it 2-0 before half-time. Liverpool were cruising to victory after half-time, with Cody Gakpo making it 3 before this stunner from Harvey Elliott making it 4-0. Jurgen Klopp was enjoying his penultimate game in charge at Anfield. But Spurs threatened a remarkable comeback when first of all Richarlison and then Heung-min Son scored with 20 minutes to go. But they couldn't find more goals. It ended 4-2 in the end. Spurs now need to go unbeaten for the rest of the season and hope that Aston Villa lose their last 2 games for any realistic chance of landing that final Champions League spot. Well, Villa themselves missed the chance to seal 4th spot after losing 1-0 at Brighton. Brighton won it with a penalty in the 87th minute. Ezri Konsa tripping Simon Adingra. Joao Pedro had his spot kick saved by Robin Olsen, but he headed in the rebound. Brighton won 1-0 and they are up to 11th. Villa stay in that crucial 4th spot. Chelsea thrashed West Ham to keep their European ambitions alive as the pressure stays on David Moyes. Chelsea winning 5-0 at Stamford Bridge to move above Manchester United into 7th. West Ham have won just once in 9 in the league. Former Real Madrid and Wolves boss Julian Lopetegui has been linked with the manager's job there. It was an even better result for Chelsea's women. They are now right back in the title race after beating Bristol City 8-0 in Emma Hayes' last home game at the club. Well, Guro Reiten scored 4 of the 8 goals at Kingsmeadow. The win came after WSL leaders Manchester City conceded 2 late goals to lose 2-1 to Arsenal. Chelsea are now 3 points behind with the game in hand and, crucially, have a better goal difference.
I think I've got a lot going on, thinking about it. It's tough. I've spent a third of my life doing this. This has been my home, my family. My family have been here. My son's been born here. I've had to experience my dad dying in the last year in a club that has been my entire heart. So I think it's felt strange.
But very happy at the end there. Now, heading into next weekend's Old Firm game, Rangers have closed the gap on Scottish Premiership leaders Celtic to just 3 points. Rangers came from behind to beat 10-man Kilmarnock 4-1 at Ibrox. Tom Lawrence scored the pick of the goals. Rangers are 3 points and 5 goals worse off than Celtic. This Saturday's showdown at Celtic Park looks like a potential title decider, and you can see it live on Sky Sports. Harlequins were beaten by Toulouse in the club's first ever Champions Cup semi-final. In their first ever semi-final, Quins battled back from 31-12 down in France to get to within 5 points of the 6-time winners. But this converted score from Juan Cruz Maya made it 38-26 to send Toulouse to the final game. And that's against the 4-time winners Leinster at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on the 25th of May. Russia's Andrei Rublev has won the Madrid Open tennis. The world number 7, who's in green, came from a set down to beat Felix Auger-Aliassime in 3 sets. Some change of fortunes from Rublev, who'd lost in the first round in 4 consecutive tournaments before this one. The favourite, Tadej Pogačar, recovered from a puncture and a fall to win stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. Pogačar came off his bike after a puncture with 11 kilometres of the 161-kilometre stage to go. He got a quick replacement and recovered brilliantly to win by 27 seconds and take the leader's pink jersey. Britain's Geraint Thomas is second. He's 45 seconds further back. And that is your sport this bank holiday Monday morning, but we'll have more later.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show today, we're taking a look at the papers with Badisha and James on a bank holiday Monday morning.
So it started in 2014, where we saw a documentary where the police were being literally harpooned by the press over not reducing the number of knife incidents or crimes on the London streets. It was all about London then. So we stepped forward and we said to the Home Office, could you support us in building a national monument against violence that would be the UK's visual symbol against our intolerance to violence? So they agreed. We wrote to all the chief constables. We had donations from all the British constabularies, all 43 of them. And we built this national monument against violence. We're metal workers here. We're not from the establishment or from the infrastructure of the UK. We're just simply metal workers stepping forward to try and do something for the UK. The backing always comes through the parents. It does not generally always come through the regular sources that you'd imagine, like the politicians. The Angel has successfully travelled to nearly 50 cities and towns. During that time, over those 10 years, there's been a lot of political awareness that we've gained in that generally there are cities and towns that will prevent the Angel from visiting them. If they feel that the public or the parents are accepting of their circumstances, or they want to brush it under the rug, they will genuinely just prevent the Angel and its educational programme travelling to their city. We specialise in making art or sculpture out of scrap or waste product. So when we had the first delivery of blades come in, which was actually from our own constabulary from Westminster, we were expecting a bin or some plastic trays or something that would contain the blades. But no, we received our first delivery in a builder's skip. and 20 or 30% of those blades that arrived were in biohazard tubes, and they were all infected with blood, so they all needed sterilising. And that was really totally out of our comfort zone.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Watch out for widespread showers today, some heavy and thundery and some more general showery rain in the southeast for a time. Many southern parts will see some good spells of warm sunshine between the showers, while the north will be rather cool and grey. That will keep pollen counts low for most there, while the warmer south will be mostly seeing moderate levels rising to high in places. Oak, the main pollen source in the south, while birch and ash are dominant in the north, but declining over central parts.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Your Pollen Pal app.
Time now to begin our news review, joined by author Badisha Mamata and also the political correspondent for The Spectator, James Hill. Thank you both for your time. James, you've been looking at The Express.
Yeah, so this is the news that finally we think we're going to get some compensation for the tainted blood scandal. Obviously, this was involving the NHS from the 1970s to the 1990s. And for about 30 years now, these groups affected. We think about 3,000 people died in this scandal, but obviously lots of living people are still affected by it today. And they've been campaigning for compensation. There's been a statutory inquiry going on. We're expecting to see the final report from that inquiry on the 20th of May, so 2 weeks' time. And now news has leaked out about the fact that we expect to see a sort of £10 billion deal of compensation. The government's going to agree to that.
Million or billion, sorry?
Billion.
Billion.
Sorry, £10 billion deal. And of course, this is important not just for the victims for getting compensation, but also because it affects, in this election year, the tax and spending plans of the government and opposition. And of course, Jeremy Hunt wants to go into that autumn statement if we're going to have an autumn election, being able to have as much fiscal headroom as possible. And so there's a big debate in Westminster and Whitehall, this back and forth, who's going to pay for the bill, when they're going to pick it up. And I think the election campaign, frankly, is going to be little to spend because you've got to pay for this, you've got to pay for the post office scandal as well. And these big historic issues are coming home to roost right now.
Thoughts?
I have been following this story for years now because I'm oddly obsessed with it. It's just an expression of overwhelming arrogance on the part of all the governments that have been implicated in this. And the scandal of the contaminated blood incident has gone on not just for decades, but actually for generations. So there are children now campaigning on behalf of their parents who never got to see justice. And all the way along, the people who were affected, who received this contaminated blood from all kinds of different sources, were just treated by everyone they went to for justice as if they were dirty, tainted, contaminated, not worth listening to. They had no power at all. And so every time a complaint was made, they were fobbed off, they were denied, and they were just straight up ignored. It's absolutely right that someone has to compensate these victims. And yes, of course, that costs a lot of money, but what is that compared to the level of human suffering and the feeling of being gaslit by everyone you went to? So I am sort of darkly happy to see that this is finally all coming out, but I just really feel for the years of dedication on the part of the campaigners, the way they kind of powered through to be taken seriously.
I mean, also Andy Burnham, in his evidence, former health secretary, suggested that corporate manslaughter charges could be brought. I know that I think criminal action has been taken in other countries that have had similar scandals around the same time. So that would be the other interesting thing to see what happens, is that obviously the conversation's brilliant, but also are individuals going to be frankly held accountable, given that we knew the warnings before this all came out in the early 90s?
You mentioned the post office, you mentioned whether gaslighting, it feels in many respects similar ways that people were treated.
And ITV is actually commissioning another drama on this as well. So, I think a lot of policy we put on this.
Well, I don't know how I feel about the entertainmentisation of these scandals, because actually the headlines speak for themselves. And exactly the parallel you draw is so relevant, because this is how power behaves. It's how institutions, governments, big companies, corporate bodies behave. It's always difficult as an individual to go up against the corporation or the individual.
I appreciate your point about entertainmentising, if it's a verb, let's make it one. But would the post office scandal have been resolved as swiftly as in the last few months, at least, if it wasn't for ITV? Because that'd been going on for years as well.
You're absolutely right. I'm not sure about the answer to that. I feel like the headlines themselves had such a soap opera element to them. The idea of these kind of small but very plucky and tough postmasters determined to clear their name actually had me cheering for the real people more than me wanting to see actors portraying them.
I think it all depends on how it's presented, and if it's done sensitively and with accuracy, I think that's great. I also think sometimes shortening something down to a couple of hours of TV drama when something's a 40-year-long scandal can actually benefit to an extent, because people take their eye off the ball that, this has been going on for years, successive governments, etc. And actually some of those are real scandals. It's not just sort of something overnight,
If you can get to grips in the course of an afternoon, not to the full extent, but get an overview of. Talking about health, lasers helping seizures.
Yes, this is incredible and, quote, game-changing news for the 600,000 people in the UK who suffer from epilepsy. Of those, 1 in 3 cannot control their seizures just using drugs alone. So this new laser therapy targets the affected brain tissue and sort of blasts away the portion of the brain that is causing these seizures. Apologies to anyone who's having their breakfast right now. I will briefly explain that the practitioners drill a tiny hole into the scalp and pass through a very, very narrow cable containing the laser, 1.5 millimetres, nothing too hair-raising, which then heats up and sort of blasts away the affected tissue. There's no other way to do it. It works, and patients can recover in up to 48 hours. The people involved in the NHS Trust, it's being trialled in London and in June. It's coming, London and in Leeds, and it's coming into effect from June onwards, have said that this is completely revolutionary. It doesn't affect everyone. It only affects those people for whom the drugs aren't working. And it's this perfect combination of medical expertise and technology. And I'm so in favour of something at the forefront of all of these industries, which really helps people with something that can be very distressing to deal with.
It's indicative, is it not, that for every story, like we talked about last hour, NHS dentists not working in the way that we would hope or should or expect, there are dozens more of cases where the NHS and healthcare providers and specialists just do remarkable stuff.
Yeah, and I think often we regard the NHS as sometimes a bit of a leviathan, a bit of a sort of huge, unaccountable body, but also there's incredibly smart people, great research going on in our NHS, some of the best doctors in the world, and this is fantastic to see. And, there's 600,000 people with suffer with epilepsy. I think, according to this story, this therapy is going to only deal with a small minority of that. But, the point is that this kind of stuff is going on, and it's really great to see. And, when they get it right, they get it fantastically spot on.
Massively so. And whilst we've been talking, a child's been born, someone's been saved, someone's been looked after, someone's been supported. I know people will have not had the treatment and care that they needed in that moment, but millions of us do at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think it's always key to remember. Blue wall.
Yes, so just sticking on the local elections theme we've been discussing, is that Labour really has been talking about these set of elections, talking them up and saying, we're going to go after the blue wall now. I think we did different definitions of how one defines the blue wall, but in terms of those kind of key Tory marginal seats that over the past 10, 15 years or so...
A blue smattering?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say the blue wall is more kind of Surrey, kind of typically sort of Jilly Cooper country, perhaps, kind of places where it's more sort of leafy and green.
But the word smattering has a certain urbane lightness to it, which I appreciate.
And this is the sort of, I think, more Essex fringe, so places like Thurrock, for instance, which, I think was important parts of New Labour's successes in 2001. So it's talking about saying, really putting the tanks on the Tory lawn here, going after all those kind of more marginal seats. And that's what Labour's really excited about these set of election results, which is that, yes, they did well everywhere, but they did particularly well in those marginals and kind of flipping those, going there from Conservative to Labour. And so Labour obviously is talking this up. They're talking about going the blue wall. They're talking about going after the pensioner vote. And really, for them, they want to think that there's no places they can't go and win.
They want to pick at the smorgasbord of seats.
Oh, you just said that because you wanted to say the word smorgasbord.
Yeah, and I just wanted more positive feedback, Badisha. That's all I was really looking for.
The vocab has been excellent this
Thank you
morning,
so much.
and I think that's exactly right. And it's great to see Labour showing a bit of drive and ambition. They've been talking a big game for the last 2 years, and I never felt there was that much substance to it. Now you've got these local election results, and they are results, and I want to see that carried forward.
We'll get more on that throughout the course of the morning. Do stay with us here on Sky News Breakfast. Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. On today's show, Israel's defence forces signal a ground invasion of the southern Gazan city of Rafah is imminent.
Plus, the path is cleared for John Swinney to become Scotland's next First Minister.
And in the Premier League, have Tottenham blown their chances of playing in the Champions League next season after losing to Liverpool?
All that to come. It's Monday, the 6th of May. The Israeli Defence Forces tell Palestinians to start evacuating the Gazan city of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are currently sheltering. They're being encouraged to go to Nibba al-Mawasi, designated by the IDF as a humanitarian zone. Documents seen exclusively by Sky News reveal that the government's considered using Iraq to process asylum seekers, much like the Rwanda scheme. 12 months on, King Charles to mark an, at times, difficult first year on the throne. The The sound of protest in land long considered sacred, which is now at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
And in sport, Lando Norris gets the first win of his Formula One career with victory in Miami, albeit with the help of the safety car.
It's very clear to me, I live so selfishly.
Madonna there, and 1.6 million fans turned Rio's Copacabana Beach into one of the biggest dance floors ever seen. It's just gone 8 a.m. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News Breakfast. We begin with a developing story. The Israel Defense Forces have been telling Palestinians to evacuate parts of Rafah in Gaza, where it's been threatening to launch an offensive for many months now. Well, the IDF released this animation telling civilians to move to Al-Mawasi, an area Israel's declared as a humanitarian area near the coast. Well, these are images from that humanitarian area, which is called, like I say, Al-Mawasi. You can see that it is being filled with tents of people who fled fighting elsewhere in Gaza. Well, let's cross live now to our international correspondent, John Sparks, who joins us in Jerusalem. John, what more can you tell us about this development?
Yeah, morning, Gareth. As you say, senior Israeli officials have been threatening a major military operation in southern Gaza, in and around the city of Rafah, for some weeks now. The defense minister yesterday said this operation could take place imminently, and it does seem like they've taken a major step towards it now. A statement this morning from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, encouraged residents in a pocket of southeast Gaza to get out and move towards what they are calling an expanded humanitarian area to the north, centered around the city of Khan Yunis and a coastal community called Al-Mawasi. And I can tell you that they have just started to drop leaflets telling civilians to do exactly that, to move to these humanitarian areas that they claim have additional field hospitals, food, water, medical supplies, that sort of thing. But I have to say, international aid agencies will greet that claim with real skepticism. They say the Israelis have not done enough to supply exactly these sort of things to facilitate the supply of humanitarian supplies so far in this conflict. I should also point out that the IDF is telling people to move back to areas that have been badly damaged in the war, like the city of Khan Yunis. That was laid siege to in January. Much of it is destroyed. But Gareth, the significance of this, I think we are standing at the brink of what is another mass migration in Gaza. A lot of the people in southern Gaza at the moment, they have come from Gaza City, they have come from northern Gaza. They are now being told to return, to move back up north. And I think what Israel is doing, what the IDF is doing, is going to test to the limit the support that they receive from the international community, certainly from their key backers in the West. Last week, the Americans said that the Israelis didn't have a credible plan to support civilians in the event that they went for an incursion into Rafah, into southern Gaza. They said they wouldn't support it. So now that it seems that the Israelis are about to launch this operation, what do the Americans, what do Joe Biden, what does the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, what does Lord Cameron, how do they respond? How are they going to deal with this crisis?
John, for the moment, following those developments for us from Jerusalem, thank you. The government here in the UK at one point considered sending asylum seekers to Iraq for processing, similar to the Rwanda scheme. That's according to documents seen exclusively by Sky News. Well, Mari's here for more on this. What have we been finding out? What have we learned?
So this is a really fascinating revelation that Sky News has come across. Now, essentially, what is being revealed by some of these leaked documents to our colleague Serena Barker-Singh of Sky News, the government considered at one point processing asylum seekers, migrants in Iraq. Now, the thing that's fascinating about this is Iraq is one of those countries where the government actually does not recommend travel to Iraq. There's only one region where it says, you know, it's essentially safe to travel, it's okay to travel, and even then they say only for essential travel. Now, this is interesting on many levels. First of all, we already have a returns agreement with Iraq, but that's only for people who are already from Iraq. Now, some of the details in these documents show that actually there was a request from the Iraqis for discretion on that returns agreement. They didn't want any kind of publicity. They didn't want any kind of official agreement, as it were, around that. Also, in some of these documents, it's revealed that it was said to have been good recent progress with Iraq on this kind of a deal. So it was relatively advanced in terms of the level of negotiations that were ongoing. What was also revealed in these documents was the fact that high-ranking officials in their guidance had actually said that the government needed to be prepared to pay over the odds to get the Rwanda policy over the line, and that essentially the initial sum that was proposed to pay the Rwandan government was actually considered quite a modest sum. Let's not forget, it's about £350 million, huge sum, and it's going to be about 1.8 million per person for the first 300 if we get there. Now, interestingly, you posed this question, didn't you, to Maria Caulfield, the government minister, asked her what she knew, what she didn't know, what she could say about it. She didn't say much, but she gives a couple little hints, so have a look at this clip.
I'm not aware of those details. Our plan is around Rwanda, and we have detained people that are being kind of earmarked for flights to Rwanda. Once those flights take off, there will be a steady drumbeat of flights going on a regular basis. I'm not aware of those plans that you talk about for other countries. Our focus is really on getting that Rwanda plan working, but also tackling immigration overall. You look at the deals we did with Albania, for example. Albanian illegal migrants are down 90%. So there is work going on with other countries, but the focus at the moment is getting those flights off the ground.
So interestingly, she didn't deny that this was being looked at by the Home Office, for instance. She just kind of kept it quite vague and said she didn't have any of the details. She wasn't really aware of plans for other countries, she said. So I thought that was really quite fascinating to see how much she would and wouldn't give us. And then also an interesting moment in that interview with her, you asked her a lot about the local elections, didn't you? And the fact that the Tories have had really quite abysmal ratings in the local elections over the weekend. And something we are not hearing from the government again and again and again is why they believe they lost so badly in those elections. If you watch all of these these ministers answer questions again and again, they always swerve the question. They will never say why they believe they lost those elections. And that's partly because if you ask them that, then they start to talk about really the soul of the Conservative Party and the fact that people like Suella Braverman want to pull them to the right, whereas people like Andy Street, who lost in the West Midlands, very, very, very tight race, very disappointing for the Conservatives, they will say we need to move more back into the centre.
And we're seeing greater success for Labour, who have moved surely more back into the centre than they did under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, for example.
Exactly. So, often it's kind of said, centre parties are the ones that win the elections, and therefore, as you've rightly pointed out, the Labour Party have done that, and it looks like electorally they might be on a better footing than when they were under Jeremy Corbyn. Obviously, time will tell when we have a general election, but so far, if the polls are to be believed, if the local election results are something to kind of give us an indication, it's looking good for Labour.
Mari, thank you. It's worth noting, actually, on the political front, that we'll be speaking to the Labour Party chair, Annalise Dodds. That's in about 5-6 minutes. Also making the headlines this morning, relatives of 3 tourists who were reported missing in Mexico last weekend have had their bodies identified. The remains of 2 Australian brothers and an American were found in a well not far from where they were last seen in Baja California. Investigators say that the men had been shot. 3 people have been charged. Rains have eased around the US city of Houston, which is experiencing severe flooding, but more is expected later in the week. High floodwaters have left hundreds in need of being rescued or evacuated. A 5-year-old boy was killed in the nearby city of Fort Worth. Rail and tram passengers face a week of disruption coming up. Members of the train drivers' union ASLEV will begin a 6-day overtime ban today. They will also stage 3 one-day strikes across different operators this week as part of that long-running dispute over pay. Let's turn our attention to Scotland because John Swinney appears set to become Scotland's next First Minister. That's after his sole challenger for SNP leader pulled out of the contention. Well, let's cross live now to Connor Gillis, our Scotland correspondent. And Connor, what should we expect to come in the coming day, and what should we expect to come from John Swinney as well?
Yeah, good morning, Gareth. A sigh of relief, no doubt, from many within the SNP this morning that the last minute, the 11th hour challenger, Graham McCormack, a grassroots activist, a thorn in the side of the party hierarchy for quite some time, 11th hour decision to pull out last night of that race. He had suggested he had 100 nominations from 20 branches, which was the test of what you needed to reach in order to enter that race. He said he had it, but after discussions with John Swinney yesterday, he has endorsed him and withdrawn from the race. And that pulls ahead the path for John Swinney to power, to the top of the SNP, a man with extensive experience within the high levels of government here in Scotland, a man who has been part of the SNP for much of his adult life, and he has been in the shadow of Nicola Sturgeon, most recently as Deputy First Minister of Scotland. And this has been a sense of drama over the past week. Let's remember Kate Forbes, the one-time SNP leadership challenger last year. She stood in that race and she lost, but she got almost 50% of the vote, and it was all eyes on what she would do last week. But John Swinney stood on a ticket of unity. He said it's time to bring the party back together, and Kate Forbes, I will give you a very senior position in my government. That was his message, and it was a message that was successful for the Kate Forbes camp, who have now rallied behind John Swinney. So what happens next? Well, it's going to be a day today of a coronation of John Swinney, no doubt. At midday, we will get the final result of those nominations. We are expecting John Swinney to be the sole contender for that. We are then expecting potentially an event from the SNP in the coming hours. As I said, a sigh of relief that Graham McCormack has pulled out of the race. It would have been difficult, it would have been costly, and no doubt it would have been embarrassing for a political heavyweight such as John Swinney to be taking the stage with a grassroots candidate. The SNP would say, well, that is democracy and that is the way that the party operates. Nevertheless, it doesn't look like it's going to happen, and we'll get the result today at midday. We'll bring it to you live here on Sky News.
We certainly will. Connor, thank you so much. Meanwhile, China's President Xi Jinping has arrived in France, his first stop on a three-country trip throughout Europe. Later today, Xi Jinping will meet with Emmanuel Macron and the President of the European Commission, that's Ursula von der Leyen. There's been a trade war with China over electric vehicles, and Beijing has been accused of assisting Russia by exporting certain technology to the country. Well, let's bring in our Beijing correspondent, Nicole Johnston, who joins us now. And Nicole, just give us a sense of the significance of this trip.
Well, this trip is really a big deal, and that's because China's President Xi Jinping hasn't been to Europe for 5 years, since before COVID. It's an important step for him. He will be trying to stabilise this difficult relationship with Europe right now. As you said, one of the biggest issues between China and Europe is Russia. Now, Europe says that China is sending dual-use items. These are things like semiconductors and machinery tools to Russia, and that enables Russia to continue to wage its war in Ukraine. China, for its part, says that it should be free to trade with any country that it chooses, so there's unlikely to be any major breakthrough on that front. The other really big issue, of course, is trade, and as you said, this trade war has been brewing. At the centre of it all is electric vehicles, batteries and solar panels. The problem for the West is that they cannot compete with the scale and the prices that China can produce these items at, especially electric vehicles. We were at one of these EV factories in China just a week or two ago, and it was really quite something to see just the scale of it, the ambitions that this country has to become a dominating world player in the EV market. And the rest of the world is struggling to catch up now that China has sort of got this head start. Europe is worried about this, the United States also deeply concerned, and manufacturing countries like France and like Germany are worried that their traditional car companies just won't be able to keep up. Now, China, for its part, has pushed back at these concerns about overcapacity. It says that the world needs China's EV vehicles and that as the world transitions to green technology, it's important that China is producing as much as it is. So many big and difficult issues are on the table between Europe and China. After France, though, President Xi Jinping will find it a little easier. He'll be heading off to Serbia and Hungary, both countries that have close relations with China and with Russia.
Nicole, thank you so much. Time to talk politics now. Let's bring in Labour's party chair, Annalise Dodds, who joins us live on Sky News. Thank you so much for your time and for doing so. A few days has passed since the local elections. Your reaction to the results?
Good morning. Well, it was very clear that people last week voted for change. They voted to turn the page on the last 14 years of decline and chaos, and to have that chance for change with a real plan for economic growth, a plan for our public services. I think that was a very clear message, but sadly Rishi Sunak doesn't seem to have listened to it, and he's not setting that date for the general election that people clearly desperately want.
The Conservative Party lost 474 council seats. You gained 186. The Lib Dems also gained triple figures. Other parties and independents over 110 seats. Is it not fair to say, with due respect, that you should have done better?
Well, you could always say that about an election, of course, because ultimately it's people's decisions next to the ballot box that determine the outcomes. But actually, if you look at the places where Labour won last week, Labour won in those areas that we need to ensure we win at the next general election. For example, in Hartlepool, Darlington, Thurrock, so many different areas where effectively Labour had been written off in the past, and now we're doing well. Now, of course, we're not complacent. We still need to make sure we're having that conversation up and down the country. But I think these results show that now people are well aware that Keir Starmer has put the Labour Party back in the service of working people. We stand ready to govern, and we need to have that general election that people are calling out for.
There are some polling and analysis that suggests that you might struggle to form a majority government based on the results of Thursday into Friday. You are a party chair. To what degree does that concern you? To what degree do you take responsibility for that?
Well, actually, I think most of that analysis assumes that you can just take local election results and somehow read off from those what will happen at the general election. That's never been the case. Local elections tend to deliver a far higher proportion of independent councillors, far higher proportion of smaller parties being elected with councillors. That's about a fifth of those who were elected actually last Thursday. That just simply doesn't read through to general elections. And as I said, when you look at where Labour's vote was at these elections, you see that Labour is winning people back in those areas that are so important on the road to number 10. Now, there's no room for complacency for Labour, but it does indicate that people have very clearly said they've had enough of that decline and chaos under the Conservatives. They want to turn the page and have that national renewal under Labour.
We'll get on to decline, as you call it, under the Conservatives. I know you've released a video that you've linked to that. Just one last question, if I can, about the local elections. You say about people coming back to Labour, but it's undeniable heavy losses for the party in wards with large numbers of Muslim voters. How do you plan to rectify that? Do you think that your position on the situation with regards to Israel and Gaza needs to change? Has that been the barrier, do you think, for the level of support you saw?
Of course, people are desperately concerned about the situation in Gaza. There is a humanitarian catastrophe there. There are appalling levels of suffering. And of course, Labour did call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We've also called, for example, for the International Court of Justice's interim rulings to be held to as well. And we really do need to see the UK government using every ounce of its diplomatic muscle right now to stop the killing that's taking place in Gaza and the appalling suffering as well. So we will continue to call for that. And of course, if there are people who have supported Labour in the past who maybe turned away from Labour for whatever reason, we want to have that conversation with them. We want to understand their concerns and, of course, act on them. And, it's really only
how will you act?
determined to be listening to every community. Sorry, go on.
How will you act?
Well, by ensuring that we have that conversation, that we are acting on the basis of people's concerns. And as I said right now, and I'm sure many viewers will have seen some of those appalling scenes on the television, including overnight, we're really saying that the UK government must be acting now with other countries and really pushing for that desperately needed immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the other changes that we've called for as well.
Your party this morning has released the first in a series of videos attacking the government, the Conservative Party. You've called it conflicts. I don't think there's much of a stretch to establish how that's come about. Although the criticism, the challenge that's repeatedly put against the Labour Party by the Conservatives is that they say, in their words, you don't have a plan, and they level that against you for so many things. You will surely disagree. Do you not think that perhaps that by creating kind of stunts like this, that you are fueling that argument for the Conservative Party, and that perhaps it would have been better to publish more details rather than a stunt video?
Well, of course, we've repeatedly published those policy proposals that we believe are essential for getting our country back on track. For example, ensuring that we get Britain building again, that we would have an industrial strategy, that we would be ensuring we set up GB Energy, a publicly owned energy company, that we would be creating those new jobs up and down the country, and of course also make sure people's incomes and living standards are improving with our New Deal for working people. So the detail of policy is there. When we have that conversation with people up and down the country, they say that change is so necessary. But of course, that change is necessary because of the decline and chaos that we've seen over the 14 years. And it is frustrating, of course, to me as a Labour Party politician and supporter that we don't see the Conservatives talking about the detail of policy. They don't want to talk about their policy over the last 14 years because people know that it's failed. They know the Conservatives can't deliver change. It's only Labour that can deliver that change that people are crying out for.
Annalise Dodds, we appreciate you joining us this morning. A good rest of the bank holiday to you.
Thank you, you too.
4 men have been arrested after £40 million worth of cocaine was found in East Yorkshire. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, an even bigger bust for the Royal Navy. Ashton's here to talk to us about this. Huge figures we're about to talk about.
Huge sums of money, but also a huge amount of drugs seized as well. If we start with the East Yorkshire operation, this was something led by Humberside Police, and it focuses on the tiny village of Lely, in which £40 million worth of cocaine, as you can see on your screen, was found inside a van that was parked in a pub car park in the Stag's Head Inn that's 18 miles away from a beach. Significant because officers investigating this crime believe that these drugs were brought ashore via a rib that had come off a much larger vessel that had been moored off the Hull coast. As part of that operation, 4 men have been arrested, 3 of them from Scotland, 1 from Colombia. So a sizable blow to the EOCG, or Organised Crime Group's operation. But equally, as you say, an even bigger haul.
This one's huge.
Yeah, huge, by the Royal Navy. So HMS Trent, they've been sort of moored off the shore of the Caribbean islands, sort of tasked with intercepting huge drug smuggling operations like this one. This is the crew that was involved in seizing £204 million worth of cocaine following a pursuit, and it really was a pursuit in that they had been on board at HMS Trent, had tracked down a suspicious vessel, in which they started noticing that men on board were throwing bales overboard. Little did they know at that stage it was cocaine they were actually throwing overboard. As part of this investigation, they were trailing this ship and had to comb the seabed to try and get back those barrels of cocaine. So they had, of course, evidence to prove exactly what was on board, and 2.5 tonnes of it was seized as part of HMS Trent and the Royal Navy's operation in this kind of remit. They have managed to seize £511 million worth of drugs and potentially stopping all of that from coming to the shores of the UK.
Ashton, thank you so much. Let's talk about Native Americans in the US now, because they're protesting against land they consider sacred from being turned into America's largest lithium mine. The mine will be crucial to the Biden administration's green energy plans. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports from Nevada.
This is northern Nevada, in the wild and wet. These are Native Americans, and this was their environmental protest. Tell me, what is this about? What's today about?
Today is the last day of the prayer horse ride across northern Nevada through our indigenous communities.
They were heading to Sentinel Mountain, which their ancestors once used as a lookout. This area, they say, witnessed indigenous massacres. One in 1865, when more than 30 tribal members were killed by US cavalry. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution, where construction has started on a lithium mine, so-called white gold, to make batteries for electric vehicles.
You know, we're people too.
Myron Smart says his grandmother escaped the massacre here in 1865 when she was a baby. Industrializing this place, he says, offends her memory and reflects the story of Native Americans through time.
To me, it's a sacred ground, but to the government, it's, you know, it's just, it's just Native American, that's all it is.
The company Lithium Americas is mining the Thacker Pass site on what is public land. It highlights a community benefits agreement signed with a local tribe. It says concerns about cultural and environmental resources were thoroughly addressed in the environmental impact assessment of a government body, and that it withstood comprehensive reviews by federal district and circuit courts. It hasn't silenced objections from opponents who maintain the key evidence lies in eyewitness testimony passed down orally through generations.
Back in our ancestors' days, they didn't write any documentations down, they didn't send letters, they didn't write in journals, so there was no way that, I guess, you know, the United States government could know our story.
What's happening here feeds into Joe Biden's energy policy. The US president wants to make this country a world leader in electric vehicles. Sourcing its own lithium is central to it. The argument here is that in pursuit of a greener future, the past is paying too high a price. James Matthews, Sky News, in Thacker Pass, Nevada.
Absolutely remarkable images there. Well, let's show you some more actually now. Imagine this, 1.6 million people on a beach in Brazil singing and dancing to Madonna. Well, as you can see, that's what happened. The Queen of Pop choosing to make her final concert, her farewell tour, free to fans. Huge numbers there. Jackie's very jealous.
I know. If I'd known, I'd have hopped on a flight.
Would you genuinely have flown over?
No.
Okay, you're not that big a fan. You're not one of those kind of super fans.
No, I'm not a super fan. But honestly, if I was her, I'd have worn a brighter dress because the people at the back will not be able to see her dressed in black. And also 1.5 million, if it was free, how do they know it was 1.5 million?
I also think from that shot just there, people at the back were struggling to see the stage, let alone Madonna. It's all about the atmosphere,
I think they put loads of screens up so you could just, you know, watch it on the screen because there was no chance you'd be able to see the tiny little pin like Madonna. She's tiny anyway, isn't she? But yeah, amazing atmosphere. It's such a great place, Copacabana, at night for an event like New Year. I've done it a couple of times and it's always packed, but I can't imagine that kind of packedness.
It looks remarkable. It was a big night in Brazil. It was also, wait for it, big night for the Premier League.
Oh, I see what kind of segue you did there, Gareth. Well
welcome.
done. It was indeed. There were loads of goals, actually, yesterday. European places up for grabs still, and the results have gone a long way to kind of sorting that all out. It was all smiles again, though, for Jurgen Klopp at Anfield. It was his penultimate home match as the Liverpool boss. The end of his reign there really quickly coming to an end now. Elsewhere, an emotional Emma Hayes says goodbye to the Chelsea fans in her final home game, but the team put on quite the display for her. And the title race in the WSL took an unexpected turn as the leaders Manchester City lost to Arsenal, meaning Chelsea still have a chance.
Good morning. You're watching Breakfast on Sky News. Let's return to the morning's breaking news now. The Israel Defense Forces have told Palestinians to leave parts of the southern Gazan city of Rafah. The IDF's indicated it'll launch what it calls a limited scope operation. That's after threatening a major offensive in the region for weeks now. Well, let's bring in the former ambassador to Libya and Jordan, Peter Millett. Peter, I was going to start by asking you your thoughts with regards to the progress of ceasefire talks. But over the course of the last 90 minutes or so, we've potentially seen this go in a very different direction.
Yes, over the weekend, all the talk was about the negotiations for a deal to release hostages and to have either a pause or a ceasefire. But it does seem to be going in a different direction. And it's going in a very negative direction, because the idea that the people in Rafah who are already living in tents can move somewhere safe is a bit of a fantasy. I mean, the whole of Gaza has been obliterated. There are no safe spaces anymore. And I think we'll see more destruction and more deaths of innocent people. It's not the way to release the hostages, and it's not the way to save a very difficult situation.
You mentioned there about people in tents already having to move. I was reading one report of a journalist, a Gazan journalist, who'd, I think, moved 4 or 5 times throughout the course of the conflict since early October. With regards to the Israelis trying to square this circle of Benjamin Netanyahu trying to pursue his stated aims of eradicating Hamas, if that is even possible, and also trying to secure the release of the remaining hostages, of which there are several dozens, how does this play into any negotiation with Hamas? Because surely if you are Hamas, you're going to say, well, we're not going to pursue a ceasefire if you're about to continue the conflict in Rafah.
I think the leadership of both sides does not have the best interests of its people at heart. Netanyahu, I believe, does not want a ceasefire. He does not want a deal, because he knows that as soon as there is either a ceasefire or a pause, there will be massive pressure for elections. He will lose those elections, and the corruption charges against him will be renewed. He wants to hang on to his position. He's been very good at it for more than 20 years, and that is his main objective, not the release of the hostages or the best interests of Israel. And it's the same for the Hamas leadership. At the moment, they can show that they're winning, that they have resisted Israel. They are the group who can protect the best interests of the Palestinian people. That's wrong. They're not protecting the best interests of the Palestinian people. But I think both leaderships are resisting a deal because they feel that that's the best way to protect their own personal interests rather than the interests of their people.
But at some point, the political pressure internally, internationally, alongside the domestic pressure, will surely draw some change in the stances of both sides? Or do you think they can remain impervious to that pressure for even longer than they have already?
No, I think the patience of the international community, particularly the patience in Washington and in Europe, also in Cairo and in Doha, I think the Americans can play a huge role in deploying their real leverage. They are the ones who are providing the money and the arms to Israel. They can exert their influence even more. And I think that is what is happening behind the scenes. Similarly, the Egyptians and the Qataris have significant leverage. I hope that they are using that leverage behind the scenes. If that is the case, then some sort of temporary deal might be on the cards. But Hamas was ramping up the stakes last night by attacking Karim Shalom. The signs that the leadership are actually willing to compromise are not positive, I'm afraid.
And Peter, you mentioned the Qataris there for a second. Just briefly, obviously these reports now that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli government, has banned, temporarily at least, the broadcasts of Al Jazeera in the Israeli in Israel. What do you make of that?
The Israeli leadership does not like free and open journalists. I mean, the only journalists on the ground in Gaza are the Palestinians themselves. In any other conflict, you would have yourselves, Sky, CNN, BBC, and all these others, focusing on the detail and focusing on the tragedy that has happened in Gaza. The Israeli leadership and the IDF do not like criticism. And I think it's one of the major weaknesses that we're seeing in Gaza is the lack of open and free journalism in Gaza, putting the spotlight on the tragedy and the killing of innocent civilians and the humanitarian disaster and tragedy which is taking place there.
Peter Millett, former ambassador to Libya and Jordan, we really appreciate your time and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
The King now is celebrating 1 year since the coronation, but without as much pageantry, obviously. Gun salutes, though, will still be among the events UK-wide after what's been, at times, tough 12 months with the King's cancer diagnosis, forcing him to spend time away from public duties. Our royal correspondent, Rhianna Mills, has the details.
Long live the King!
It was a display of the kind of monarch he wants to be. Made even clearer in the months that followed. Supporting communities.
Is it electric? Do you have the electric ones?
Yes, it's all environmentally friendly, don't worry.
Highlighting the climate crisis.
Real action is required to stem the growing toll of its most vulnerable victims.
Celebrating culture and getting out to the Commonwealth. Then this happened.
Buckingham Palace has just released a statement about the health of the King. Diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer.
A setback with public engagements cancelled, but not entirely stopping him. Christina Murren from the King's Charitable Foundation told me they have still regularly been in contact.
His level of interest in still getting updates and hearing what was going on and wanting to know that the work of the foundation was still progressing was very important to him. Lovely, lovely to see him back out this week, though, engaging with the public and, you know, really being able to drive those causes that he cares so passionately about.
His illness has had another unexpected impact on those campaigning. Out again a year on, but with a slight change of tack, a broader message of down with the crown, replacing Not My King.
But it is about saying we're here and we are growing and we are making progress. We're seeing a drop in the polls for the monarchy. We're seeing a growth in the polls for the opposition. We saw a poll yesterday in Scotland saying most people want to get rid of the monarchy. So, yeah, it's all uphill for us.
Public support was never a given for King Charles. One of the reasons he wanted to make the palace feel more open.
Thank you very much.
The Queen, in recent months, playing host alone, winning praise for stepping up, as well as continuing her own work on things like sexual violence.
I can only imagine her role has changed drastically in the last year, but the fact that she has still kept to her passion, I just think shows what a dedicated person that she is.
This week we saw him back to work. He wants to do as much as he can, but with his treatment ongoing, it's the doctors who are going to decide.
It's for miles.
Goodness me, I'm not going to attempt to read it without my specs.
The writing was always going to be small, every moment from their coronation written down, and no doubt forever etched on their minds as they continue the work that they hope will really define their moment in history. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Jackie's here to talk to us about everything in the world of sport, in particular the young man over your shoulder.
Yes, if at first you don't succeed, give up. No, keep going.
110 times keep
really,
going.
I've just taken my top line. But Lando Norris, amazing. He must be a happy fella this morning because he's claimed his first victory of his Formula One career. And as Gareth said, in his 110th race, as he took full advantage of a timely safety car, he then pulled away from Max Verstappen to win the Miami Grand Prix. Well, it means that he's finally shed the unwanted record of the most podium finishes without a win in his sixth season of F1. Norris ran only sixth in the race's opening stages, but the decision by McLaren to extend his opening stint proved to be inspired when the safety car was called for a crash. It was Williams' Logan Sargent. Having already inherited the lead, with all those ahead of him having pitted by then, including the race leader, Verstappen, Norris was then crucially able to pit while the rest of the field ran into the reduced speed behind the safety car and re-emerged still in front.
It's incredible. I don't know what I'm going to say. I just want to smile the rest of the day. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling seeing everyone applauding and cheering and seeing the whole team there, so happy. I've let them down a few times, but I think today makes up for every moment that we've had together, the ups and downs. Today.
There was a surprise guest in the McLaren garage, and it was the former US President Donald Trump who spoke with McLaren boss Zak Brown before the race. A lucky mascot, perhaps. In yesterday's Premier League action, Liverpool beat Tottenham 4-2 to all but end Spurs' hopes of Champions League football next season. After his touchline argument with boss Jurgen Klopp, Mo Salah was back in the manager's good books after opening the scoring for Liverpool on 16 minutes. Andy Robertson made it 2-0 before half-time. Liverpool were cruising to victory after half-time, with Cody Gakpo making it 3 before this stunner from Harvey Elliott to make it 4-0. Jurgen Klopp was enjoying his penultimate game in charge at Anfield. But Spurs then threatened a remarkable comeback when, first of all, Richarlison and then Heung-min Son scored with 20 minutes to go. They couldn't find any more goals, though, and it ended 4-2. Spurs now need to go unbeaten for the rest of the season and hope that Aston Villa lose their last 2 games for any realistic chance of landing the final Champions League spot. No wonder he was skipping all the way down the touchline. Now, Villa missed the chance to seal fourth spot after losing 1-0 at Brighton. Brighton won it with a penalty in the 87th minute. Ezri Konsa tripping Simon Adingra. João Pedro had his spot kick saved initially by Robin Olsen, but he headed the rebound in. Brighton won 1-0 and are up to 11th. Villa stay in 4th. Chelsea thrash West Ham to keep their European ambitions alive as the pressure stays on David Moyes. Chelsea winning 5-0 at Stamford Bridge to move above Manchester United into 7th. West Ham have won just once in 9 league matches now. Former Real Madrid and Wolves boss Julian Lopetegui has been linked with the manager's job there. It's an even better result for Chelsea's women. They are now right back in the title race after beating Bristol City 8-0 in Emma Hayes' last home game at the club. Well, Guro Reiten scored 4 of the 8 goals at Kingsmeadow. The win came after WSL leaders Manchester City conceded 2 late goals to lose 2-1 to Arsenal. It means Chelsea are now 3 points behind with the game in hand and, crucially, now have a better goal difference.
I've got a lot going on, thinking about it. It's tough. I've spent a third of my life doing this. This has been my home, my family. My family have been here. My son's been born here. I've had to experience my dad dying in the last year in a club that has been my entire heart. So.
And she was pretty emotional at the end. Now, heading into next weekend's Old Firm game, Rangers have closed the gap on Scottish Premiership leaders Celtic to just 3 points. Rangers came from behind to beat 10-man Kilmarnock 4-1 at Ibrox. Tom Lawrence scored the pick of the goals. Rangers are 3 points and 5 goals worse off than Celtic, so this Saturday's showdown at Celtic Park looks like a potential title decider, and you can watch it live on Sky Sports. Harlequins were beaten by Toulouse in the club's first ever Champions Cup semi-final. Well, Quins battle back from 31-12 down in France to get within 5 points of the 6-time winners. But this converted score from Juan Cruz Maya made it 38-26 and sent Toulouse into the final. And that's against the 4-time winners Leinster at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on the 25th of May. Russia's Andrei Rublev has won the Madrid Open tennis. The world number 7, who's in the green shirt, came from a set down to beat Felix Auger-Aliassime in 3 sets. Some change of fortunes for Rublev, who'd lost in the first round in 4 consecutive tournaments before this one. The favourite, Tadej Pogačar, recovered from a puncture and a fall to win stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. Pogačar came off his bike after a puncture with 11 kilometres of the 160-kilometre stage to go, but he got a quick replacement and recovered brilliantly to win by 27 seconds and take the leader's pink jersey. Britain's Geraint Thomas is currently second. He's 45 seconds back. That is some recovery.
Certainly is.
He deserves the pink jersey.
Although I can't imagine during the Giro that you actually get to drink the champagne.
No.
I'm just thinking about it, but, you know.
Just waste it.
Just waste it, waste it. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning. James Badisha here all morning, taking a look through the papers. Our final look on a bank holiday Monday.
So it started in 2014, where we saw a documentary where the police were being literally harpooned by the press over not reducing the number of knife incidents or crimes on the London streets. It was all about London then. So we stepped forward and we said to the Home Office, could you support us in building a national monument against violence that would be the UK's visual symbol against our intolerance to violence. So they agreed. We wrote to all the chief constables. We had donations from all the British constabularies, all 43 of them. And we built this national monument against violence. We're metal workers here. We're not from the establishment or from the infrastructure of the UK. We're just simply metal workers stepping forward to try and do something for the UK. The backing always comes through the parents. It does not generally always come through the regular sources that you'd imagine, like the politicians. The Angel has successfully travelled to nearly 50 cities and towns. During that time, over those 10 years, there's been a lot of political awareness that we've gained in that generally there are cities and towns that will prevent the Angel from visiting them. If they feel that the public or the parents are accepting of their circumstances or they want to brush it under the rug, they will genuinely just prevent the Angel and its educational programme travelling to their city. We specialise in making art or sculpture out of scrap or waste product. So when we had the first delivery of blades come in, which was actually from our own constabulary from Westminster, we were expecting a bin or some plastic trays or something that would contain the blades. But no, we received our first delivery in a builder's skip, and 20 or 30% of those blades that arrived were in biohazard tubes, and they were all infected with blood. So they all needed sterilising. And that was really totally out of our comfort zone.
Let's take a look at the papers. Badisha and James have been doing so through the course of the morning. We've been talking about Madonna lots throughout the course of the programme and just then during the break, and it links to this story in the Mirror today, in tenuous terms.
Well,
we'll get there eventually.
Let's see, shall we? So, pubs are back, but not in the guise that you saw them before. Everyone knows that over the last few years, particularly since the pandemic, lots of these hostelries and drinking venues have shut down, partly because of the cost of living crisis, bills being so high, partly also because people are drinking less and working from home more. So now beer brewer giant Heineken, which owns a company that owns lots of pubs, is committed to bringing back at least a couple of hundred of the 500 that have closed over the last year. But pubs are not for drinking. Apparently they're also for karaoke, bit of Madonna. I know that you like a bit of Madonna, I do too. Or you can rent out a room as if it's a charming, cosy countryside inn, or you can have a meal. So they're turning into these family-style, very wholesome entertainment and rest stop venues, but the olden days of the kind of scary sort of orange and brown-hued pub where everyone's just been drinking, day drinking all day long. I'm judging right now. They are probably on the decline as people's tastes are changed.
I'm also really impressed with your second, third and fourth references for the word pub. You've managed to put in hostelry and entertainment venue. This is where we got to with Madonna. You performed Madonna once
First and
Carrie.
last time of doing karaoke, slow clapped off the stage. I was that bad and never did it again. Still having that anxiety dreams about
James,
it.
you will wheel out like a prayer repeatedly if given the chance.
Yes, so I haven't had a drink today yet, so you're spared this on Sky News. But I do enjoy a good song. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of great places around.
Would this bring you back into a pub, do you think?
I mean, I don't think I ever left the pub, but this is the different thing. I'll happily do karaoke with my friends, social circle, people of who we have mutual compromat, but I don't think I'd do it in front of random strangers and sort of 50 people of different... Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I think it's great news, obviously, pubs are reopening, they're important community hubs, but don't expect me to be wheeling out Lucky Star anytime soon.
Well, the bank holiday is young, just saying.
Spending more time in the day.
One community you can often find in pubs, especially rural pubs, is farmers. I should know, I spent a fair bit of time doing both. And seriously, though, lots of concern about the weather.
Yes.
And this is above and beyond farmers complaining about the weather.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a new survey by the National Farmers Union. They've done this every 14 years, and they say this is the starkest picture we've got for British farming right now this year. It's partly to do to food production dropping in the UK, in terms of we've got one of the wettest weathers, I think, since the 1830s, and obviously that impacts on things like arable farming. But also, of course, we talk about inflation, cost of living in pubs. Elsewhere in food production, it means that energy costs go up, which puts on knock-on consequences for farming communities. And as a result of that, we're going to probably see a price spiral in terms of British food. This all comes at the same time as been government inaction. We meant to have the National Food Strategy. I think it's been about 3 years now. And obviously that combined with things such as the ending of the Brexit, the EU subsidies regime, means it's a very, very difficult time for farmers. And of course, now a record 2/3 of them are either forecasting a decline in their profits or bankruptcy over the next 12 months. And that will have huge consequences for the British economy as a whole.
And what worries me in particular, when you consider kind of this gloomy outlook the farmers paint a picture of, is the sector is the worst per capita for suicide. And so you've already got a community that has that challenge and has that challenge of accessing resources and support and talking and looking after each other. You then combine that with elements they can't control. It's a really worrying mix. Plus then the food security, it just transcends so many boundaries.
I'm so appalled and distressed to hear you say that about suicide. I hadn't thought about it, but of course these are people's livelihoods, and not just livelihoods, but they're the kind of business that you are in generationally. If you're in farming, your parents did it, their parents did it, and nobody, particularly in urban centres, questions or thinks about where their food came from. No. Because out of sight, out of mind. And to hear that these factors are really pressing on people in this industry is really terrible. And of course, all of that is going to be rolled onto the consumer as well. So both ends of this economy are going to be squeezed.
Just time to play you both your favourite artists, because this is in the papers lots today. Let's have a bit of Madonna, shall we? And this is remarkable. 1.6 million people. Would you have gone if you'd got the chance?
I definitely would have gone. This is Madonna ending her celebration tour at Copacabana Beach. What's so great is that 1.6 million people showed up, and she was like, this is amazing. We have the beach, we have all of these people. And then she said, and Jesus is here too, because Christ the Redeemer's statue, but he got third billing.
James, I'm going to have to stop you there before you even get to the microphone. Do stay with us on Sky News.
Heard that before.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. On today's show, Israel's defence forces signal a ground invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah is imminent.
Plus, the path is cleared for John Swinney to become Scotland's next First Minister.
And in the Premier League, have Tottenham blown their chances of playing in the Champions League next season after losing to Liverpool?
Plenty to come. It's Monday, the 6th of May. The Israel Defence Forces tell Palestinians to start evacuating the Gazan city of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are sheltering. They're being encouraged to go to nearby Al-Mawasi, designated by the IDF as a humanitarian zone. Documents seen exclusively by Sky News reveal the government considered using Iraq to process asylum seekers, much like the Rwanda scheme. 12 months on, King Charles to mark an, at times, difficult first year on the throne. The sound there of protest in land long considered sacred, which is now at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
And in sport, Lando Norris gets the first win of his Formula One career with victory in Miami, albeit with the help of the safety car.
Madonna and 1.6 million fans turned to Rio's Copacabana beach into one of the biggest dance floors ever seen. It's just gone 9 in the morning. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Sky News. We begin with this developing story. The Israel Defence Forces have been telling Palestinians to evacuate parts of Rafah in Gaza, where it's been threatening to launch an offensive for months now. Well, the IDF released this animation telling civilians to move to Al-Mawasi, an area Israel has declared a humanitarian area near the coast. Let's bring you some live images of that region, a place, like I say, called Al-Mawasi. You can see already filled with tents of people who fled fighting elsewhere in Gaza. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, John Sparks, who's in Jerusalem live for us now. John, tell us more about this announcement by the IDF and also these leaflets that have been dropped as well.
Yeah, that's right, Gareth. Senior Israeli officials, I think we have to say, have been warning or threatening a major new offensive into the city of Rafah and surrounding areas in southern Gaza for the last few weeks. And the defense minister yesterday said that this offensive could be imminent. That, as talks about a ceasefire in Cairo, seem to fizzle out. And it does seem now like we are a major step towards this operation into Rafah. A statement from the Israel Defense Forces this morning encouraged residents in southeast Gaza to get out, to move towards what they are calling expanded humanitarian areas to the north, centered around the city of Khan Yunis and a coastal community called Al-Mawasi as well. And I can tell you that, yes, they have started dropping leaflets in these areas telling people to do exactly that, move to these humanitarian areas that they say will contain field hospitals, food, water, medicine, additional humanitarian supplies. But I have to tell you that the international aid agencies, groups like the WFP, will treat this with real skepticism. They say the Israelis simply haven't done enough in this regard since the conflict in Gaza has begun. I should also say that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is telling civilians to move back to areas that have already been badly damaged in the fighting. The city of Khan Yunis, for example, was laid under siege in January. That has been badly damaged. Parts of it have been very badly bombed. And I think the significance of this announcement are pretty clear. We're standing at the brink of what is going to be another major mass migration of civilians in Gaza. We've got what, 1.2, 1.4, nobody's really sure, 1.4 million civilians packed into the south, packed into Rafah. It seems that they are going to have to move again or face the consequences. And I really think that Israel is going to test the limits of the support that it receives internationally, certainly from Western nations like the United States. Last week, their Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he warned the Israelis if they went ahead they were planning to go ahead with this incursion into Rafah, he said Israel didn't have a credible plan to support civilians and that they wouldn't support it. So what does he do now? What do the Americans, Joe Biden, what do they say now? What does Lord Cameron say? How do they respond? Are they going to support this? I think we're entering uncharted territory here.
John, for the moment, thank you so much. And there's more of John's analysis on the Sky News website and Sky News app for you to read in your own time too. Well, earlier I spoke to Peter Millett, the former British ambassador to Libya and Jordan, about developments in Rafah.
The idea that the people in Rafah who are already living in tents can move somewhere safe is a bit of a fantasy. I mean, the whole of Gaza has been obliterated. There are no safe spaces anymore. And I think we'll see more destruction and more deaths of innocent people. It's not the way to release the hostages, and it's not the way to save a very difficult situation.
Another news this morning. The government at one point considered sending asylum seekers to Iraq for processing, similar to the Rwanda scheme. That's according to documents seen by Sky News. Mari is here for more on this. What have we learned this morning?
So, Gareth, this is a really, some would say puzzling, some would say fascinating, some would say troubling story that's been revealed by Sky News. So, our colleague Serena Barker-Singh has seen leaked documents that show that at some point the government were considering sending migrants, asylum seekers to Iraq to be processed, to have their asylum claims processed in a third country, similar to the Rwanda plan. Now, we already have a returns agreement with Iraq, but that's obviously only for people who are actually from Iraq. This was a slightly different scheme. Now, it didn't actually come off in the end, but nonetheless, these documents reveal that it was being looked into. Negotiations were happening with Iraq. They were seen as kind of going with good progress at the time. And interestingly, it's important to point out that Iraq is a country where, if you go on the FCDO website, the government website, it will say that it does not recommend travel to Iraq aside from one region, and even that one region they only say for essential travel only. Now, this is a really fascinating revelation on many levels. I've now managed to get a government response, finally, Gareth, from the government on this story. So I'm going to read you that now. They say the UK is continuing to work with a range of international partners to tackle global illegal migration challenges. Our Rwanda partnership is a pioneering response in the global challenge of illegal migration, and we will get flights off the ground to Rwanda in the next 9 to 11 weeks. So not really commenting actually on the story. No. They're not commenting on these leaked documents, for instance. They're not commenting on Iraq. But this is fascinating on many levels, and I think we can hear a clip from the government minister that you spoke to earlier, Gareth, Maria Caulfield, about what she did and didn't know.
I'm not aware of those details. Our plan is around Rwanda, and we have detained people that are being kind of earmarked for flights to Rwanda. Once those flights take off, there will be a steady drumbeat of flights going on a regular basis. I'm not aware of those plans that you talk about for other countries. Our focus is really on getting that Rwanda plan working, but also tackling immigration overall. You look at the deals we did with Albania, for example. Albanian illegal migrants are down 90%. So there is work going on with other countries, but the focus at the moment is getting those flights off the ground.
So you see the minister there really trying to double down on the Rwanda plan, saying we've got to get the Rwanda plan going, we've got to get flights off the ground. But this new revelation from Sky News shows potentially the lengths to which the government were willing to try and go to, or even just explore, to try and get a third country asylum processing plan off the ground. Interestingly, in some of the leaked documents that Serena has given to us, it talks about how high-ranking officials, some of their guidance said that the government needed to be prepared to pay over the odds for the Rwanda policy, for instance. And the fact that this is costing over 350 million evidently was seen as actually quite reasonable. It was seen as a modest sum by those high-ranking officials. Not everybody would agree with that, of course, but it's interesting to see some of the government thinking behind this third country policy.
Well, any more developments, we're following them closely. Mari, for the moment, thank you so much. Some of the day's other stories for you now. Let's start with Scotland, shall we? John Swinney appears to be the next SNP leader and First Minister after his sole challenger for SNP leader, Graham McCormack, pulled out of contention. Mr Swinney's likely elevation is happening on the same day as Scotland marks 25 years since the first Holyrood election under devolution. Relatives of 3 tourists reported missing in Mexico last weekend have identified their bodies. The remains of 2 Australian brothers and an American were found in a well not far from where they were last seen in Baja California. Investigators say the men had been shot. 3 people have been charged. Rail and tram passengers face a week of disruption. Members of the train drivers' union, ASLEF, will begin a 6-day overtime ban today. They will also stage 3 one-day strikes across different operators this week as part of a long-running dispute over pay. China's President Xi Jinping has arrived in France, his first stop on a 3-country trip throughout Europe. Later today, he'll meet with Emmanuel Macron and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. There has been a trade war with China over electric vehicles, and Beijing has been accused of assisting Russia by exporting certain technology. Well, let's bring in our Beijing correspondent, Nicole Johnston, who joins us live now from Beijing. What's on the agenda beyond, do you think, that trade war in electric vehicles? What will be discussed? I assume the war in Ukraine, for example.
Exactly. This is a really significant trip for the Chinese president. He hasn't been in Europe for 5 years, so it is a big deal. Russia is likely to be the main issue on the agenda. We've had a steady drumbeat of diplomacy here in Beijing with the German Chancellor, the US Secretary of State. They've been here and they've all been pushing this same message that the Chinese president will hear in Europe, which is they want China to back off in its support for Russia. They say that China has been sending items like semiconductors and machinery tools which allow Russia to continue to build weapons and wage war in Ukraine. Now, they have warned China against this. China, for its part, though, says that it should be free to have a trade relationship with any country that it chooses. So it's likely to be a difficult and a tense, at times, conversation with both the French president and the European Commission president, Ursula von der Leyen. She has taken a particularly hard stance against China on the issue of trade. And the big problem there has been electric vehicles. China has managed to catch up with the West. It is producing electric vehicles at pace and at scale. We were at one of their EV factories over the last couple of weeks, and it's quite extraordinary what China is managing to do now in terms of the technology and the sophistication of these vehicles. And it has got the West very worried, not only Europe, but the United States as well. They say that China is overproducing, that it's overcapacity. The European Commission is now in the middle of an investigation, threatening to impose tariffs on China. So that is the other big issue that will be on the agenda. After France, the Chinese president will be heading to Serbia and to Hungary, where he's likely to get a much warmer reception.
We'll follow that trip closely here on Sky News. For the moment, Nicole, thank you. Native Americans are protesting against land that they consider sacred from being turned into America's largest lithium mine. The mine, though, will be crucial to the Biden administration's green energy plans. And our US correspondent James Matthews travelled to Nevada.
This is northern Nevada, in the wild and west. These are Native Americans, and this was their environmental protest. Tell me, what is this about? What's today about?
Today is the last day of the prayer horse ride across northern Nevada through our indigenous communities.
They were heading to Sentinel Mountain, which their ancestors once used as a lookout. This area, they say, witnessed indigenous massacres. One in 1865, when more than 30 tribal members were killed by US cavalry. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution, where construction has started on a lithium mine, so-called white gold, to make batteries for electric vehicles.
You know, we're people too.
Myron Smart says his grandmother escaped the massacre here in 1865 when she was a baby. Industrializing this place, he says, offends her memory and reflects the story of Native Americans through time.
To me, it's a sacred ground, but to the government, it's, you know, it's just, it's just Native American, that's all it is.
The company Lithium Americas is mining the Thacker Pass site on what is public land. It highlights a community benefits agreement signed with a local tribe. It says concerns about cultural and environmental resources were thoroughly addressed in the environmental impact assessment of a government body, and that it withstood comprehensive reviews by federal, district and circuit courts. It hasn't silenced objections from opponents who maintain the key evidence lies in eyewitness testimony passed down orally through generations.
Back in our ancestors' days, they didn't write any documentations down, they didn't send letters, they didn't write in journals, so there was no way that, I guess, you know, the United States government could know our story.
What's happening here feeds into Joe Biden's energy policy. The US president wants to make this country a world leader in electric vehicles. Sourcing its own lithium is central to it. The argument here is that in pursuit of a greener future, the past is paying too high a price. James Matthews, Sky News, in Thacker Pass, Nevada.
Well, Ash is here for two remarkable stories involving, well, illegal substances, let's be honest, but huge figures.
Yeah, these are really successful two operations that we're talking about today. One that started in East Yorkshire in a tiny village called Lely, in which £40 million worth of cocaine that was found stashed within the back of a van in a pub car park was seized by Humberside police. This is all of it laid out in total. Inside that van, officers found 500 kilos of cocaine. Officers believe that because this pub is so close to a beach that actually this was all discovered on a rib that was then brought over to shore from a much larger vessel. And in total, as you sort of say, it's a massive, massive sum of money, £40 million. 4 men arrested because of that operation, that successful operation. 3 men from Scotland. One of those men was from Colombia. So a sizable blow to that organised crime group's operations, potentially. Comes at the same time, though. The crew from the HMS Trent vessel, Royal Navy crew, have managed to seize a gigantic £240 million worth of cocaine.
It looks like a brick wall in that image.
It does. You're so right. And that's what the crew on board there, who have been in post at the Caribbean Sea sort of area since December last year, tasked with, well, other things, but also the majority of it being hunting, drug smuggling operations. So as part of it, this huge sum of cocaine was seized following this pursuit involving another suspicious vessel, as they describe it to be. They were tailing them, managed to see some of those men kind of throwing overboard these giant barrels of cocaine, which they managed to pick up. In total, 2.5 tonnes of it was seized. But as part of that operation, it means in total now that that crew on board HMS Trent has seized something like £500 million worth of drugs.
Huge figures, but I guess still a no pun intended, drop in the ocean compared to the global supply. But Ashna, thank you. Sleaze, scandal, drama. It sounds like what you'd expect from a hit TV show, but not a political party video until now.
Destruction. A plummeting pound, soaring costs of long-term borrowing.
Failure. Almost a third higher than 2023. And just plain old incompetence.
Well, a trailer for a Netflix spoof series called Conflicts, I'll let you do the maths as to how they came up with that, launched this morning, marking what Labour claims has been, in their words, 14 years of Tory chaos. Earlier, I asked Labour Party Chair Annalise Dodds whether her party should focus on sharing policy ideas rather than stunt videos.
We've repeatedly published those policy proposals that we believe are essential for getting our country back on track. For example, ensuring that we get Britain building again, that we would have an industrial strategy, that we would be ensuring we set up GB Energy, a publicly owned energy company, that we would be creating those new jobs up and down the country, and of course also make sure people's incomes and living standards are improving with our New Deal for working people. So the detail of policy is there. When we have that conversation with people up and down the country, they say that change is so necessary. But of course, that change is necessary because of the decline and chaos that we've seen over the 14 years.
Needless to say, the Conservatives and the government decried the video and hit back. Well, let's move on now because the King is celebrating 1 year since the coronation, but without as much pageantry as the coronation itself. Gun salutes, though, will still be heard among events UK-wide after what's been, at times, a tough 12 months, with the King's cancer diagnosis forcing him to spend time away from public duties. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, has more.
Long live the King!
It was a display of the kind of monarch he wants to be. Made even clearer in the months that followed. Supporting communities.
Is it electric? Do you have the electric ones?
Yes, it's all environmentally friendly, don't worry.
Highlighting the climate crisis.
Real action is required to stem the growing toll of its most vulnerable victims.
Celebrating culture and getting out to the Commonwealth. Then this happened.
Buckingham Palace has just released a statement about the health of the King. Diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer.
A setback with public engagements cancelled, but not entirely stopping him. Christina Murren from the King's Charitable Foundation told me they have still regularly been in contact.
His level of interest in still getting updates and hearing what was going on and wanting to know that the work of the foundation was still progressing was very important to him. Lovely to see him back out this week, though, engaging with the public and, really being able to drive those causes that he cares so passionately about.
His illness has had another unexpected impact on those campaigning. Out again a year on, but with a slight change of tack, a broader message of down with the crown, replacing Not My King.
But it is about saying we are here and we are growing and we are making progress. We're seeing a drop in the polls for the monarchy. We're seeing a growth in the polls for the opposition. We saw a poll yesterday in Scotland saying most people want to get rid of the monarchy. So, yeah, it's all uphill for us.
Public support was never a given for King Charles. One of the reasons he wanted to make the palace feel more open.
Thank you very much.
The Queen, in recent months, playing host alone, winning praise for stepping up, as well as continuing her own work on things like sexual violence.
I can only imagine her role has changed drastically in the last year, but the fact that she has still kept to her passion, I just think shows what a dedicated person that she is.
This week we saw him back to work. He wants to do as much as he can, but with his treatment ongoing, it's the doctors who are going to decide.
It's for miles.
Goodness me, I'm not going to attempt to read it without my specs.
The writing was always going to be small, every moment from their coronation written down, and no doubt forever etched on their minds as they continue the work that they hope will really define their moment in history. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
It's just gone 9:23 on a Monday morning. Still to come on The Breakfast Show. Cancelled gigs, talk of air conditioning units falling from the ceiling. We'll speak to a music journalist, Paul Stokes, about what's going on at Manchester's Co-op Live Arena. I want to know how to better protect your skin from the sun. I promise you summer is round the corner. Well, there's a course for that now. We'll talk to the cancer charity behind it. Good morning. You're watching Breakfast on Sky News. Coming up, why a new arena that's supposed to be full of crowds is full of problems. We'll be speaking more about that in a few moments' time. And we'll have all the action from the world of sport too. Meanwhile, despite technological advancements in cancer research and treatment, NHS waiting lists and budget shortfalls are having a knock-on impact for patients and their treatment. And our Home Affairs editor, Jason Farrell, has been speaking to some of them affected.
Patrick has been diagnosed with bowel cancer and is undergoing chemotherapy at the Royal Free Hospital.
Thank you.
If the tumour can be reduced, it can be more easily surgically removed.
So we got to set it for 2 hours.
His future is dependent on the slow drip of chemicals that attack the cancer cells in his body. 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. And as Patrick knows too well, that word opens up a world of uncertainty.
My father passed away when I was young, when I was 14. He died of cancer. I have 13-year-old twins, so I couldn't shift initially the thought, is this going to happen again?
Take a breath in and hold it.
After 3 rounds of chemo, scans showed it had done the job. The surgery can go ahead.
You may breathe normally.
Cancer is more treatable now. More of us are surviving it because technology is advancing. Here at the Royal Free, one of the UK's largest cancer treatment centres, that ranges from cutting-edge scanners and quicker diagnostics to new drugs offering greater survival.
So we're doing surgery quicker, more keyhole, robotic surgery. And for me, my thing is drug treatments, and they are exponentially increasing in terms of what we can offer our patients.
But the numbers of us getting cancer is on the rise, projected to increase by 1/5 by 2040. And the NHS is not meeting target waiting times for treatment. That stretch on resources has an impact on patients like Bo. A 29-year-old actor and dancer, she has what's called a mutated BRCA1 gene, which means her chances of getting cancer dramatically increase in her 30s. She has a 60% chance of getting ovarian cancer and a 90% chance of getting breast cancer, so has decided to get a preventative double mastectomy and hysterectomy.
The truth is, it doesn't really feel like a choice when you're presented with a figure like that. It's kind of like saying, would you get on a plane with a 90% chance of it crashing? I sure no, I wouldn't.
But waiting times for her preventative treatment is slow. 2 years at the earliest. So she's crowdfunding to go private. Her grandmother, mother and her aunt all died of cancer because of the BRCA1 mutated gene. But she hopes to be the first female in her family in generations to survive it.
You know, I would love to be thinking about or worrying about the things that every other 29-year-old is worrying about. I've got some bloody Olivier Awards to win.
Cancer can crush dreams, bring worry and heartache. We're making great progress, but it remains the defining health issue of our time. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Summer is on the way, I promise. And there's a potentially dark side, though, of course, to the warmer months. To mark Sun Awareness Week, a cancer charity has launched the UK's first sun safety course. So I'm joined now by Michelle Baker, Chief Executive of the Melanoma Fund. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. Talk to us about what you're doing.
Brilliant. So this is the first, the sun guarding course, sun and heat protection for sports and outdoor recreation. We are seeding this into the sports sector because from a long time there's been nothing in the syllabus or any sports coach organisational courses about sun protection. And we wanted to make this, you know, something that's a change. At the moment, skin cancer rates are rising at a ridiculous rate. But what are we doing what are we doing about this? Not a lot. So this sun guarding course hopefully will create more awareness.
So what is the course? Talk us through it.
So it's a free course. It's a 2-hour course. It's for sports coaches and outdoor activity leaders. And it talks about the importance of protecting people that you're working with in the sun, about understanding the UVA index, about your rules and responsibilities around sun protection. It's a course that will actually, people think they know about sun protection, but actually when you go on this course, you'll realise there's a lot more to know about.
And if there were 3 or 4 takeaway points from this course, what are people learning about, like you say, sun protection?
They're learning about the fact that, you know, a tan is not a healthy thing. If you're working with people outdoors, you need to lead by example. So understanding the importance of sun protection, understanding how to use it, when to use it, understanding that if it's a cloudy day, that you still need sun protection, and passing that on to people, especially children. If you're sporting a tan, what's that saying about you know, your practices and how you're influencing children? So the most important thing, I think, is the leading by example, making sure coaches understand their responsibility around sun protection.
And this is all part of, I guess, Sun Awareness Week as well, or it sits within Sun Awareness Week.
That's right.
If you go, I was Bella in my ear, Australian, and said a moment ago, look, it's sun cream. That's sun cream in a hat. It doesn't feel as though in the UK we're quite up to speed, really, as much as we should be as other parts of the world.
No, I think this may be a legacy from past generations. We wore sunscreen when we went on holiday, and that's where we went out and typically bought a bottle of sunscreen, SPF, probably SPF 5, something ridiculous, for our summer holidays. But the fact is, we need it every day in this country when the UV index is 3 and over. So we have to kind of build this in now and understand that, you know, skin cancer, it's not just something that older people get. You know, melanoma is actually, it's a form of skin cancer, the most deadly form of skin cancer, but it's actually rising fastest in sort of Gen Z age groups. So the fact is, sunbeds, just as bad. You know, UV light, protect your skin, and, you know, you will have healthy skin.
And just very briefly, where can people find more details?
So the Melanoma Fund website, the course is free on there. We've been saying please donate during this very important time to all melanoma charities, especially the Melanoma Fund. We're a small charity, so all donations are welcome. Have a look on there. It's great for sports coaches, outdoor activity leaders, and also parents who want to learn more about how to protect their children in the sun. So Melanoma Fund website.
Michelle, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really important message, Jackie.
Really important.
You think it's great to get the kids outside to be active,
Yeah.
but there is the flip side to it.
Yeah, and Paul Merson's really been campaigning about this as well. But I've got a son who's a tennis player, and he's a big fella now, but when he was little, when he'd go off to tournaments on his own, I was like, make sure you put your sun cream on, because he's on his own and he's a kid. But they would not, because they put the cream on their face and they couldn't hold their rackets, because it's, you know, cream is quite slippy, isn't it? So, I don't know, maybe sun cream manufacturers maybe need to make it more kid-friendly so kids can actually put it on.
But also great to have that leadership from coaches and people who are running the tournaments to be like, come on, you've got to do it. I know. Bit of that pressure.
Because they're out there for hours and hours and hours at a time. In the sport, Jurgen Klopp, his tenure as Liverpool manager is coming to an end quite quickly now, and it's not been great for them of late, but he was all smiles at Anfield yesterday, skipping along the touchline after that win in his penultimate match as Liverpool boss. Elsewhere, there was a lot of emotion for Emma Hayes as she says goodbye to the Chelsea fans in her final home game. The team put on quite the display. And the title race in the WSL took an unexpected turn as leaders Manchester City lost to Arsenal, meaning Chelsea still have a chance.
Good morning, you're watching Breakfast on Sky News. Let's just bring you some more updates on our top story on an imminent Israeli operation in the southern city of Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Well, Palestinians from Rafah have started to leave the area. That's after being informed by the Israeli military to evacuate this morning. These are some new images we're bringing you this morning. Israel has instructed civilians there to move to what Israel says is a designated humanitarian zone known as Al-Mawasi. The Israeli military says it wants to target Hamas strongholds in Rafah. We'll bring you more developments on that story throughout the course of the morning. Meanwhile, Manchester Cop Live is set to be the UK's biggest indoor arena when it opens, but so far it's been beset by problems. A string of performances by acts including Peter Kay, Olivia Rodrigo and Take That have been moved or postponed because of problems with the £365 million venue's heating and ventilation systems. Well, let's bring in freelance music journalist Paul Stokes, who joins us. It should have been a great fanfare, and it's been a bit of a flop, to say the least, eh?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at the bookings they had, you know, the Take That playing multiple nights, you know, with their connection to Manchester, obviously Olivia Rodrigo's a huge name to have there, and Peter Kay. They obviously wanted to launch the venue with a bang, and I think perhaps what's happened is these shows would have been booked 2 years ago when these tours were first on the market, and the venue's construction just hasn't lived up to the timing, and they've tried to make it work, and they've got themselves into the terrible position of really letting fans down. You should never be in a queue to a gig that gets pulled unless it's the singer losing their voice.
That was Boogie with Dahoudi, or American artists. How does it get to that point where people are queuing up and with 10 minutes to go?
Yeah, I can't. That's the bit I can't understand. Because I think anyone who knows music venues will look at it and go, "This is going to work. It's fine," or "It's not." And it does seem to me slightly strange that they ever got to the point there were people in a queue. I think obviously they wanted to get these shows on. They want to create an instant legacy for the venue. You remember when the O2 opened, they had Prince playing 21 nights. When you open big music venues like this, there really is an emphasis to try and have absolutely blockbuster shows, really memorable moments early on, because then that creates the heritage instantly for the venue. And I can understand the people running the venue really wanted these shows to go ahead, because you're probably not going to be able to get them again, because these shows will be part of international touring commitments and you can't just move them 2 weeks down the line because they'll be somewhere else. But it seemed like, you know, you should never have people in a queue if it's not like, as I say, the singer's lost their voice and they can't go on last minute.
What's the driver for building a venue like this? Because I'm thinking there's already all the arenas. You can already go, if you can get the scheduling right, and play to 40, 50, 60,000 people at a football arena. Why does the sector then need a bespoke space like this? When you say the O2, for example, they already exist.
I mean, obviously, in that part, there's obviously the AO Arena, which we know about in Manchester, where a lot of the shows have gone to. I think that the thing is, with arenas, the live music sector, I mean, in the time that I've been a music fan, has gone from being people who wore weird band T-shirts to being a huge, big social part of people's lives, and in terms of, you know, going out for an evening. And I think that market's just grown and grown, and they've seen in that part of England there aren't as many big arenas. I mean, in London you've got 2 or 3 already, plus the football stadium. So I think it is that thing. There is demand there for people to go and see live music.
Very briefly, what will happen going forward? Do you think eventually it will all get sorted, the music will do the talking, and people will forget about the opening couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think once they have a good run, it's going to be forgot about. The big thing they might be lucky with, on the May the 14th, which is next Tuesday's the next scheduled gig, is going to be Elbow. Now, if there's a band who have a connection to Manchester, who can bring people together and make people feel great, it's them. So this could be their Pulp at Glastonbury 95 moment where they get a bit of a thing. If it doesn't happen, though, it's going to, you know, that story's going to rumble on.
There's going to be a lot of touching wood, I'm sure, in the interim. Paul, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming in. Jack is here to talk to us about the world of sport, in particular one young man in Formula One.
I know. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal.
It's very true.
Just keep going till you do it. That is the message, I think, from Lando Norris this weekend. He's claimed his first victory of his Formula One career in his 110th race as he took full advantage of a timely safety car. He then pulled away from Max Verstappen to win the Miami Grand Prix. Well, it means that he's finally shed the unwanted record of the most podium finishes without a win in his 6th season of F1. Norris ran only 6th in the race's opening stages, but the decision by McLaren to extend his opening stint proved to be inspired, because then the safety car was called out for a crash. It was Williams' Logan Sargent in that crash. Having already inherited the lead, with all those ahead of him having pitted by then, including the race leader Verstappen, Norris was then crucially able to pit while the rest of the field ran behind the safety car at a reduced speed, and then he re-emerged still in front.
It's incredible. I don't know what I'm going to say. I just want to smile the rest of the day. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling seeing everyone applauding and cheering and seeing the whole team there. So happy. I've let them down a few times, but I think today makes up for every moment that we've had together, the ups and downs.
I think he's going to be smiling all week. Well, the surprise guest in the McLaren garage yesterday was the former US President Donald Trump, who spoke with McLaren boss Zak Brown before the race. Bit of a lucky mascot. Now, in yesterday's Premier League action, Liverpool beat Tottenham 4-2 to all but end Spurs' hopes of Champions League football next season. Well, after his touchline argument with boss Jurgen Klopp, Mo Salah was back in the manager's good books after opening the scoring for Liverpool on 16 minutes. Andy Robertson made it 2-0 before half-time, and then Liverpool were cruising to victory after half-time, with Cody Gakpo making it 3 before this stunner from Harvey Elliott to make it 4-0. And Jurgen Klopp very much enjoying his penultimate game in charge at Anfield. But then Spurs threatened a remarkable comeback when, first of all, Richarlison and then Heung-min Son scored with 20 minutes to go. They couldn't find more goals, and it ended 4-2. Spurs now need to go unbeaten for the rest of the season and hope Aston Villa lose their last 2 games for any realistic chance of landing that final Champions League spot, and they have to play Man City. Well, Aston Villa missed a chance to seal 4th spot once and for all after losing 1-0 at Brighton. Brighton won it with a penalty in the 87th minute. Ezri Konsa tripping Simon Adingra. João Pedro had his spot kick saved by Robin Olsen, but headed in the rebound. Brighton won 1-0. They're up to 11th. Villa stay 4th. Chelsea thrashed West Ham to keep their European ambitions alive as the pressure stays on David Moyes. Chelsea won 5-0 at Stamford Bridge to move above Manchester United into 7th. West Ham have won just once in 9 Premier League games. Former Real Madrid and Wolves boss Julian Lopetegui has been linked with the manager's job there. It was an even better result for Chelsea's women. They are now right back in the title race after beating Bristol City 8-0 in Emma Hayes' last home game at the club. Well, Guro Reiten scored 4 of the 8 goals at Kingsmeadow. The win came after WSL leaders Manchester City conceded 2 late goals to lose 2-1 to Arsenal. Chelsea are now 3 points behind with a game in hand, and crucially, they now have a better goal difference.
I think I've got a lot going on, thinking about it. It's tough. I've spent a third of my life doing this. This has been my home, my family. My family have been here. My son's been born here. I've had to experience my dad dying in the last year in a club that has been my entire heart. So.
Very emotional yesterday. Now it's tight title races all round, including in Scotland, and heading into next weekend's Old Firm game, Rangers have closed the gap on the Scottish Premiership leader Celtic to just 3 points. Rangers came from behind to beat 10-man Kilmarnock 4-1 at Ibrox. Tom Lawrence scored the pick of the goals. Rangers are 3 points and 5 goals worse off than Celtic. This Saturday's showdown at Celtic Park looks like a potential title decider, and you can see it live on Sky Sports. Harlequins were beaten by Toulouse in the club's first ever Champions Cup semi-final. Well, Quins battled back from 31-12 down in France to get within 5 points of the 6-time winners, but this converted score from Juan Cruz Malia made it 38-26 and sent Toulouse to the final. And that's against the 4-time winners Leinster at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on the 25th of May. Russia's Andrei Rublev has won the Madrid Open tennis. Well, the world number 7, who's in green, came from a set down to beat Felix Auger-Aliassime in 3 sets. Some change of fortunes for Rublev, who'd lost in the first round of his 4 consecutive tournaments before this one. So he enjoyed that moment. Now the favourite, Tadej Pogačar, recovered from a puncture and a fall to win stage 2 of the Giro d'Italia. Well, Pogačar came off his bike after a puncture with 11 kilometres of the 161-kilometre stage to go, but he got a quick replacement and recovered brilliantly to win by 27 seconds and take the leader's pink jersey. Britain's Geraint Thomas is second, 45 seconds back. You would deserve the jersey after that, wouldn't you?
You certainly would.
The puncture, you'd think it wasn't your day, and actually you turned it around.
And turned around in great form as well. Somebody else who's in great form at the moment is Madonna, hey? We're gonna...
Madge, I know.
She's doing fantastic work. Also, Frank Turner, musician, who's claimed a record-breaking series of shows. We'll have more on that in a few moments' time. And like I say, Madonna. The Queen of Pop and 1.6 million fans on Rio's beaches, turning it into one of the biggest dance floors ever seen.
So it started in 2014, where we saw a documentary where the police were being literally harpooned by the press over not reducing the number of knife incidents or crimes on the London streets. It was all about London then. So we stepped forward and we said to the Home Office, could you support us in building a national monument against violence that would be the UK's visual symbol against our intolerance to violence? So they agreed. We wrote to all the chief constables. We had donations from all the British constabularies, all 43 of them. And we built this national monument against violence. We're metal workers here. We're not from the establishment or from the infrastructure of the UK. We're just simply metal workers stepping forward to try and do something for the UK. The backing always comes through the parents. It does not generally always come through the regular sources that you'd imagine, like the politicians. The Angel has successfully travelled to nearly 50 cities and towns. During that time, over those 10 years, there's been a lot of political awareness that we've gained in that generally there are cities and towns that will prevent the Angel from visiting them. If they feel that the public or the parents are accepting of their circumstances, or they want to brush it under the rug, they will genuinely just prevent the Angel and its educational programme travelling to their city. We specialise in making art or sculpture out of scrap or waste product. So when we had the first delivery of blades come in, which was actually from our own constabulary from Westminster, we were expecting a bin or some plastic trays or something that would contain the blades. But no, we received our first delivery in a builder's skip, and 20 or 30% of those blades that arrived were in biohazard tubes, and they were all infected with blood, so they all needed sterilising. And that was really totally out of our comfort zone.
Let's talk music now, because the chart-topping star Frank Turner is claiming a world record for playing the most gigs in different cities over the course of 24 hours. So tell us the details in a moment, but first, let's take a listen. Well, that was The Road. That was Frank Turner. I'm glad to say that Frank joins us now. Thanks so much for doing so. How did it go?
It went as well as it could have gone. I don't want to sit here and tell you that it was the most fun I've ever had. There were some pretty challenging moments in it, but I survived. I've got back home and I've had some sleep.
And still your dressing gown on a Monday morning, Frank?
You know, I figured that if I was ever allowed a day off, today might be the day. The last 36 hours or whatever it was tough.
Talk to us about what you did then, because this all started in Liverpool and ended up in Portsmouth. It was quite the journey.
It was, yeah. So the plan was to go for the world record number of shows played in 24 hours. The existing world record was 10. I went for 15. My crew put the run together. I was the one standing on stage at half-hour shows every show, and every show was sponsored by a independent record store and took place in an independent music venue.
Why was that so important to you? We've just had, actually not so long ago, didn't we, Independent Record Store Day?
Yes, which I put out a 7-inch for, and I was the ambassador for in Europe as well. I mean, these are the kind of logistical kind of pillars of the independent music scene, which is my culture, it's my home, it's where I grew up, it's what's given me my career, and they're both sectors that have had a rough time in the last decade, should we say. So doing what I can to support those is very important to me.
Going and doing a big set, 3 hours, 2.5 hours, or a big festival is one thing. What was it like going from almost kind of pillar to post, half an hour here, half an hour there, throughout the course of the country? And these were set, some of them, 2, 4, 6 in the morning.
Yeah, they were, and those ones, I was pleasantly surprised that people came, but the entire run was sold out. To be honest, the actual moment of playing was the more survivable part, because I love playing, and a certain kind of instinct and routine kicks in. Sitting in the back of a cab from one venue to another, we had Free Now, the cab company, provided the transport. Sitting in the back of the cab in between the shows, that was probably a harder bit in sort of psychologically.
And Frank, is the Guinness Book of Records trophy, certificate, plaque, is it on its way?
I did, fingers crossed. We took many notes and lots of sort of logistic documentation. That's all being sent off.
Fantastic. And this also comes as you've launched a new album as well, your 10th.
Yes, that was the other hook, of course, for doing this. My 10th solo record came out on Friday. It's called Undefeated. I'm very proud of it. I'm quite sort of grateful and pleasantly surprised that I've done 10 albums. That's a lot of albums. But it is out now.
Well, Frank, everyone deserves a bit of R&R on a bank holiday Monday morning. Nobody more so than you. So we really appreciate you making time for us. We'll leave it there. Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you.
Cheers. Well, from Frank to Madonna, shall we? Ashley, Mari, Jackie's here. We've played her a fair bit, but I'm sure she won't mind a few extra minutes of our time, shall we? Take a look at this. So this is Madonna, obviously, and on the other side of that camera screen is 1.6 million people on the beaches of Brazil. Mari is dancing along as this play. Ashla is
Actually,
stock
Mari's
still.
too young. No, but neither of them know who she is. Do you know it's Madonna? Come on.
God.
I am joking. It's
Big
a
fan?
joke.
Big fan. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody that my favourite song of hers is Material Girl. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, I like the newer ones. You know that one with the with Justin Timberlake, 4 Minutes? I loved those ones that she did.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I
TikTok,
loved those
whatever,
ones.
however it goes.
Yes, that one.
But why did she wear black? Because Copacabana Beach is big. I'm not even sure it's big enough to fit 1.6 million. I don't know about that. But why wear black? No one at the back can see. No one.
Knowing Madge, I'm going to suggest that she probably had at least one outfit change. So I doubt it was black the whole way through.
I assume it's to make the headdress really pop.
That's what I think when I get ready in the morning, is how can the headdress pop? On that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you all for your company this morning. Thank you for your company this morning as well. Stay with us on Sky News.